move a motion at the call of the chair. Councillor Shaw?
So moved.
Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Can I have someone please move the approval of the minutes?
So moved, Hawkins.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. Okay, we're going to now consider EX 21-4, the water utility rate information. This was tabled from the September 23rd, 2020 Priorities and Planning Committee meeting. Can I ask administration to introduce the report? Oh, actually, do you want to do the presentation first? Sorry. We have, with us today. Okay, good. Mr. Lacey?
Yeah. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm going to make a very quick introduction. We do have a presentation here today to accompany the report. And so Ms. Bryden, Director of Assessment, Tax and Utility Billing, and Mr. Curtis Doney, Director of Water, Wastewater and Environment, will kind of give a high-level overview about our water utility, specifically around rates and how rates are determined, et cetera. This is coming out of a meeting back in December when the 2021 budget was deliberated by Council. There was a request for further information. So we're here today to provide that. And perhaps, Madam Chair, at your discretion, once the presentation is completed, I'll just have a few concluding remarks.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Lacey. Okay, thank you. Ms. Bryden and Mr. Doney, if you could go ahead.
Good morning. I am Deborah Bryden, Director of Assessment and Property Revenue Services. And with me is Mr. Curtis Doney, Director of Water, Waste and Environment. Council asked administration for information on the utility model and specifically in relation to two items. One being the implications of lowering the daily fixed rate or shifting the costs to the consumption rate in an effort to address affordability. And second, an answer to the question we all receive, why is my water bill so high? I don't use much water. In order to provide a clear picture of these requests, it's worthwhile to provide a general overview of the utility system. Curtis will talk to you about our utility system and related costs, and then I'm going to talk to you about the current rate structure and the impacts of the adjustments to the rates and ongoing work for the utility.
Mr.
Thank
Doney?
you. Through you, Madam Chair. I'm going to walk through our drinking water system, our wastewater system, and our drainage system at a very high level. There may be an opportunity in the coming months to provide more detail through a presentation like this. So our drinking water comes from Buffalo Pound Lake, and the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Plant treats that water as according to a permit that's provided to us from the Water Security Agency from the province of Saskatchewan. That water is treated and it's pumped 60 kilometers to the city of Regina. That water comes to the location on Pasqua Street and 9th Avenue. There's two large reservoirs there. Those are 2 of 5 reservoirs in the city of Regina. So the drinking water is stored in those reservoirs. The water then goes into pump stations, and so there's also 2 pump stations in that same location, North Pump Station and North Zone Pump Station. One has a blue roof, you might recognize it. So those pump stations then pump the drinking water into big pipes, and then smaller pipes, and eventually into your home. So when it gets into your home, we use the water for drinking, for showering, flushing our toilets. Once we are done with water, it goes down the drain, and it enters our wastewater system. Very similar, it starts in small pipes and goes to larger pipes, and will likely end up into a wastewater pumping station. There's many wastewater pumping stations in the city of Regina, primarily because we're relatively flat. So those lift stations literally lift up the wastewater and then allow it to flow by gravity again. All the wastewater, the majority of the wastewater in the city of Regina ends up at the McCarthy Boulevard pumping station, which is the largest wastewater station on McCarthy Boulevard. From there, we pump it approximately 5 kilometers to the west to the wastewater treatment plant. And the wastewater treatment plant treats the wastewater and it goes into Wascana Creek. And so the wastewater treatment plant has undergone major renovations in the last few years to meet new regulatory requirements. Along with that, we have a stormwater system. So the stormwater system is when the rain falls and the snow melts and it goes into catch basins. So the catch basins are connected to small pipes and the larger pipes, and that goes to Wascana Creek untreated. So the big difference is that our stormwater is untreated and our wastewater system is treated. So with all of this infrastructure, there are many different challenges and opportunities. Some of the opportunities is to work with residents to further understand the system and to adjust behavior to ensure that we have a sustainable system. For example, not putting fats, oils, and grease into our wastewater system or using the water at a certain time of the year. Some challenges, though, is that aging infrastructure. So some of our pipes are from the early 1900s. It's also important to try to keep our drainage system and our wastewater system separate. Extreme weather, power outages, as we've recently seen, floods and droughts have a big impact on the utility system. So as I outlined, there's a different cost to maintain the utility system. The majority of the costs are fixed costs, so all that infrastructure I spoke about is required to be there regardless of how much water we use. The hydrant is there, ready to be used, even if we never use the water. So all the pipes, all the pumping stations, all the treatment plants are there, and that's our fixed cost. Approximately 80% of our costs are fixed, and they're unimpacted by consumption. However, if we do use more water, there is a slight increase. Approximately 20% of our costs are based on variable cost. So more electricity, or we buy more water on Buffalo Pound. But the main message here is that most of the costs are fixed, that the infrastructure has to be in place, has to be available and ready to use when we need it, regardless of how much we use. And now Deb will talk a little bit about the revenue side.
So, the rates. As we've mentioned, the city's utility is a full cost recovery utility, which means that we charge fees to the users to recover the full cost of the service. It's important that we consider all the costs of the operating system to ensure that we have the financial resources to provide the service. Our rate structure uses fixed and volume or variable rates. Fixed rates are referred to as the daily base charges on your utility bill. These charges are based on the meter size and are charged on a per-day basis, regardless of consumption. Our revenue generated through fixed rates is approximately 35% of our total utility revenue. The variable rates are referred to as consumption charges on the utility bill. This charge is a per cubic meter and is the same for all customers, regardless of the size of your meter. This rate is variable and is tied solely to water usage. Our revenue generated through variable rates is approximately 65% of our total utility revenue. The variable rate revenue is dependent on things like the weather or consumers' efforts to conserve. Those two items have direct impacts on our revenues from variable rates. This slide shows two bars showing our fixed and variable revenues alongside our fixed and variable expenses. The City of Regina's utility rate structure is similar to other utility systems across Canada in that our rates are not in direct alignment with the cost structure. To align rates, we would need to shift greatly towards the fixed rate and away from the variable, rather than the opposite. As shown, the revenues we earn are 35% fixed and 65% variable, while our expenses, on the other hand, are 80% fixed and 20% variable. The city needs sufficient revenues to fund the expenses, and we can move the rates around, but if we do not have enough revenue, we risk the long-term sustainability of our utility. We would need to find other revenue sources, such as the tax base, in order to fully fund the utility. So Council asked specifically to see the impacts of shifting the utility rates away from the fixed rate, increasing the variable rate. So if we shift the rates so that we decrease the base rate and increase the variable rate, what happens? Here we look at the impacts on a few typical customers. And there's a more detailed version of this slide in chart 2 on page 6 in your report. But as we look at this chart, it's important to note the customers in each case could be one of many different profiles, i.e. a single resident in a condo can be a high-income single professional or a senior citizen on a fixed income. For a single-family dwelling unit, the sample may be a family of 5, a single professional, or a senior couple, or a low-income family. In the case of commercial, there are many different commercial customers, such as restaurants who may use more water, or retail stores that likely use less. These examples do not include large industrial customers, but they are reflected in customer 7 in the report chart. Those customers would see a significant increase in their monthly bill with each rate increase. As you can see, in some cases, customers will see benefits of a fixed rate reduction, but not all. Even with a reduction in the bill for some residents, the reductions will not be targeted to those residents in financial need. In fact, in some cases, with an increase in the variable rate, residents who have financial need may be hit the hardest, families living in older homes with poorer infrastructure. In essence, rates do not solve the issue of affordability. Changing the rate structure can change where our revenues come from, the variable rate or the higher water consumers, or the higher water consumers already subsidize the fixed expenses. And changing the rate structure does not necessarily mean households with a low or fixed income would benefit. Some of our work underway the work in this report discussed the model, expenses and rates, but doesn't address the ability to pay. Council has requested a report related to options to help offset costs of the utility for low-income residents, and we'll be doing that work this year, and the report is scheduled to come forward in Q3 of 2021. We also have a plan in place to prioritize and meet environmental and system challenges to ensure a sustainable utility for many years to come. And work with the AMI project, there will be an opportunity for the utility rate to influence behaviors that will benefit both the utility and the users. This will also be an opportune time to incorporate an engagement strategy that will educate the public on our water. So that question, why is my water bill so high? I don't use much water. There are some important things to remember. The utility bill we receive is not just for the glass of water I pour every day. It also includes charges for sewer and drainage and recycling. Our utility is a self-funded model, a fully sustainable 25-year model, which is not common amongst water providers, and it's a good thing. We're taking care of our assets and planning for our future. The water that comes from our tap is coming all the way from Buffalo Pound. It travels a long way and requires treatment so that we have good, safe water to drink. The cost to deliver that water is the same for every resident, regardless of their consumption. The fixed utility rates only generate 35% of our revenues, while our fixed costs are 80%. We need to ensure that we pay 100% of our expenses in order to be fully funded. So we rely heavily on the variable rates for 65% of our revenues. We've shared a lot of information with you, and likely we'll look back on our notes and realize that we missed something. But I want to leave you with a few final thoughts. The actual cost of delivering good quality water to each resident is the same, regardless of how much water is consumed by the resident. Our current base charges do not fully fund our fixed expenses. However, our utility model is fully funded and sustainable with a solid plan for future requirements. Lowering our base rate alone leaves the model at risk. no longer self-sustaining model, we would need another revenue source. Lowering the base rate, increasing the variable rate puts a lot more pressure on the variable requirement and has different impacts on different customers. At the end of the day, lowering the base rate doesn't resolve concerns related to affordability. And we do have a report coming in Q3 of 2021 which will identify options to address affordability. Also, the AMR and AMI project will also help identify alternate ways to charge for our utility. And with that, Curtis and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Is there any questions at all? Mr. Lacey, did you want to just open up?
Yeah.
And then they can ask
No,
questions.
thank you through you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Deb. Thank you, Curtis. I think you did a very good job giving an overview here. The only comments I really have is I just reflect back on the conversation as I recall that happened in December of 2019. And it was about getting a better understanding of the fixed and variable components of the utility rate charge with I think with a thought around if you change the ratio of those two charges, is there a way that you could maybe address affordability, the affordability question of water? And so I would really summarize the report before you here that I think it would be administration's view that changing the ratio of the fixed and variable components really doesn't address affordability because that just addresses your water consumption, which isn't necessarily tied to your income status. And so really, if you look at the options, and we call them options in the report, option one is really to come back with maybe a targeted program on what the options might be of a targeted program that addresses affordability. And while we call it an option, what I want to make clear for council members is that work is underway and a report will be coming back to you. So we're not really seeking any direction or permission to continue with that work. A motion's been passed. We're working on it. And in the second option, there is really just to highlight that if there was a desire to do a significant overhaul of the utility rate structure more broadly than just affordability, we would recommend that we kind of come back to that after we've implemented the new AMI or water meter system, because there will be different technology and different information or better information that we will have that would better inform that conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lacey, and thank you for the presentation. Councillor Stadnichuk, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to thank the staff for the presentation. It was very informative, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the report that comes forward in Q3 on affordability. I do have some questions that I just want some clarification on. So I understand now that 80% of the costs are fixed for those utility costs. However, over the last 10 or 15 years, there's been significant increases to the utility rate. So I want to get an understanding of, it seems like we have been funding the utility quite a lot. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of where that money, how that money has gone into the costs. And the second question, and I'll just ask both at the same time, the second question through the chair is, when we have new subdivision developments, is the cost of the new infrastructure in terms of the water, sewer, storm drainage infrastructure, is that covered by these, I can't remember what they're called, service development fees? So if you could answer those two questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnichuk. Who'd like to take that question, or both those? Mr. Doney?
Through you, Madam Chair. So as mentioned, the utility rates have gone up over the last 10 years, and primarily where that funding has gone to is investing in our infrastructure. So our renewal programs for our water, wastewater, and drainage, and primarily our underground pipes. So we now are implementing our water and wastewater master plan that have shown that we need to continue to invest in that underground infrastructure to reduce the number of water main breaks and to reduce sewer collapses on our wastewater system. So if we look back over the last 10 years, we've significantly increased the amount of money we put into our existing infrastructure. On the question of new development, I'll give it a test, and if I need some help, I'll get some help. But basically, the developers install all of the infrastructure, small pipes in the new development, and if anything is installed that supports the development and a larger community, that would be in our existing SAF fund, so our servicing agreement fund. So it's the small stuff is installed by the developer. A large pumping station, for example, may be installed by the city, but through the servicing agreement fees. I'll just ask Diana to confirm or
Great.
adjust.
Anything to add, Ms. Harlech? Sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chairman. That is correct. And the portions that are attributed to any of those major projects are only the portions that are attributed to the growth component. So it might not be the 100%. It's usually a portion of, because there'll be benefit to the existing community.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Through the chair, would I be able to do one follow-up question?
Absolutely, yes.
So with the increases that have happened, I would actually like to see the what the total amount has been and how that's been invested, but at a later time that could happen. But are we going to, is the hope that eventually we will not have to increase the utility rates because our infrastructure will be more or less in good shape, or is there an expectation that the needs are so great that we're going to have to continue to increase utility rates? Thank you.
Just for clarification, Councillor Stadnichuk, was that list for the SAF dollars that you were wanting, or?
No, for the total utility, the water charges. So the water bill that you receive, it's been increasing. At one point, it was like 9% a year, 4% a year. So anyways, it's been increasing significantly over the last number of years. And so I'm just trying to understand where we are in terms of, I know that I get a lot of calls about water main breaks, so I know that there's still infrastructure issues, but I just want to get a sense of where's the gap? Is there still a significant gap?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and that would, Mr. Lacey, if you would like to respond to that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. So I think the first observation I would make is that the utility fund is a self-sustaining, fully funded self-sustaining fund. And so when we talk in our OCP about long-term financial viability being one of the key objectives of the city in the OCP, I would say the utility fund and how we have that model structured, that is a long-term financially viable model. And the second comment I would make is I think we are ahead of many other cities in this regard with respect to our utility models. So I do think it's fair to say if you go back 5 or 10 years, you would have seen utility rate increases in the range to 8 or 9%. And that was in part due to the fact that we were moving and ensuring that our utility model was sustainable. In the last 4 years now, including 2021, that increase has been in the 2 to 3% range. The last 3 years it's been 3%, and the year before that is 2%. So I do think that speaks to the fact that we've gotten our utility model to a financially sustainable position. And if you look at many of our neighboring large municipalities, typically their water utility rate increases now on an annual basis are higher than what ours have been the last 3 or so years. And I think that speaks to the work that was done by previous councils to get to the model to a financially sustainable position. I would also note that just with respect to the rate increases and where that funding has gone, so as part of the budget book in our annual budget planning, we do bring forward a utility fund budget, and that utility fund budget not only speaks to the operating costs and the maintenance costs of the facility, but also the capital plans and where the capital expenditures are planning to occur. So essentially, any of the money that's brought in through utility charges are either going towards the annual operating cost of the utility, the purchase of water, et cetera, but as well towards the capital plan. And the water utility infrastructure, as noted, a large part of it's fixed, but I don't think what people realize is that it's hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure. And so that capital plan usually is in excess annually of $50 million. So do we expect to see utility rate increases in the future? I think that's always a crystal ball piece, but given my earlier comments around where we're at from a sustainability piece, I think future rate increases will be reasonable and just reflective of the fact that operating costs do go up, cost of materials with respect to the pipes and all of the infrastructure that we got to put in place do go up naturally with the cost of inflation and just the cost of goods that you typically see.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lacy.
Madam Chair, could I do one more question?
Sure.
Through the chair, just because that answer just sparked another question. Are there other ways of funding rather than through user fees in terms of funding this infrastructure? When we have other capital projects, we find other ways of funding. So I just want to know if there are other funding options rather than just through user fees.
Mr. Lacy?
No, thank you, Madam Chair, through you. So that's another great question. And so, when I refer back to some of our principles that are in the OCP, one of the principles is user pay. So those individuals that are using that service pay for that service. And so in part, that's why we have a utility model that we call self-funding, so that at the end of the day, the users are paying for that water service that they're receiving. Certainly, you can look at other funding sources. So other funding sources, if you think about that, the biggest one that comes to mind is the property tax base. So you could decide to move away from, council could decide as an example, to move away from a fully funded, sustainable utility model that is sustainable through water utility rates that users pay, to some other system where for example, using property taxes to subsidize a portion of the utility costs. And some cities do that. That's not where we have gone with our model. And if you think of other sources, sometimes they'll come to council to borrow money. And sometimes that will happen with the utility capital program as well. If we don't have enough money in the reserves, it's fairly rare, but from time to time we'll come forward and seek borrowing approval. At the end, the repayment of that loan, the principal and the interest, comes out of the utility fund, comes out of the water rate charges that we charge residents and businesses that use the water system, because once again, it's a user pay model.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. I just want to thank Curtis, Deborah, and Barry for the report as well as the presentation. It really did clear up a lot of questions that I had. I think the lesson here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can't escape the costs associated with treating, processing, and delivering water to the city of Regina. It's just a matter of how we pay for it. So I just want to make sure we're still on track for both option 1 and option 2, just to be clear, the redevelopment of the utility rate structure. That will come down the road after we've dealt with the metering infrastructure. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. Option 1, we are on track to bring a report back to council in Q3. And option 2 is just really kind of highlighting here that there are real opportunities perhaps for us to look at our rate structure and how we charge, and we have better systems and better information perhaps to do those things, i.e. in peak water usage periods, maybe charging a higher rate for water, like some power corporations do for electrical consumption, etc., just as an example. So right now we don't really have the ability to do that, and I think down the road there might be opportunities to analyze and look at whether that would make sense for us to take a different approach, and we have the ability to do that.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have an undertaking associated with option 2 going forward. If it's more intensive than just an undertaking, please let me know, and perhaps I can consider an amendment. But to Councillor Stadnichuk's point, it seems like really the only surefire way of removing some of those base costs from the utility bill is to actually move or shift everything over, or some of it at least, to the property tax base. Would it be feasible to provide a high-level assessment when the report on option 2 comes forward as to what that would look like and what it would do to the utility model? To be clear, to actually move all of the fixed costs from a user pay system onto the property tax base. Is that something that you could consider, or at least report on, in option 2?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's certainly something that we can look at when we get, I mean, that is something I guess you could even do today, right? But that is something certainly that I think is an undertaking once we have a new system in place, that we come back and have a broader level conversation about our utility rate structure, to the councillor's question. You know, even under option 1, if you decide to provide some type of subsidy or grant with respect to dealing with affordability questions, I think you have a question there as council as well. How are you going to fund that? I think you made the comment, Councillor Stevens, that at the end of the day, the cost is the cost. So if council wishes to make decisions with respect to helping with affordability, at the end of the day, that funding has to be found somewhere. So, you know, I believe that there's a potential we could have that conversation at least on that option 1 piece, even when we come forward with respect to that discussion around option 1. So as an undertaking, yes, I will commit that we can go away and at least bring something back more broadly when that AMI project is completed, to have a conversation with council to seek direction, etc. Noting that at the end of the day, a councillor, very valid observation, the cost is the cost. It's really about where you're paying it from.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much, Barry. Through the chair, my final question, and it's only because we're talking about the utility bill, and this is mentioned in the report, recycling is charged on the utility bill. Will administration still be coming forward in the future with that waste utility model in its entirety? So in other words, a discussion about whether or not recycling or garbage should be on that bill at all. Is that report still pending?
Thank you. Mr. Onright?
Through the chair, Councillor Stevens, can you repeat the question again?
I'm asking specifically about the recycling charge that's on the utility bill. We've had a discussion in the past about turning waste and recycling into a utility model. Is there still a report coming forward on whether or not we will talk about garbage or recycling, and whether or not it's a standalone utility, and whether or not it will appear on the utility bill?
Mr. Onright?
Through the chair, yes, there's a report coming forward. It'll come in the end of Q3 or end of Q4 in 2021. We're collecting the data from the organic pilot project, because that will feed into this report also.
Okay, perfect. Through the chair, and just to be clear then to that point, council will have an ability to decide whether or not any waste services still appear on the utility bill, or if it's covered entirely by property taxes. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councillor Fundura?
There we go. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I appreciate the overview and explanation, because I've been asking these questions for quite a while, and maybe not necessarily completely understanding the impact or how it fits into the daily life of residents. So I do appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense, and I've learned quite a bit and looking at things a different way. But to you, Madam Chair, I have a few questions, if I may. First question would be it's a historical question. At some point, a few years back, the bill came to me every 2 months, and then it was changed to once a month. And I mean, I can understand the conversation from Mr. Lacy that certain things changed, infrastructure was deteriorated, so we needed more funds to keep up. Can I get explanation? Because I got those questions saying, well, I got the bill once every 2 months now, it's monthly, but they charge it out higher than they were for 2 months. Through Madam Chair, can I get a, if there is one, if there's an answer, or if there's a comment, I'll appreciate that. If not, I'll just leave it at that then.
Mr. Lacy?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So, yes, back in 2007, the city did transition to monthly utility billing. And this was mainly due to benefit the customer from a number of perspectives. One, we had been receiving feedback from commercial customers that moving to a monthly billing process was more in line with their accounting systems, and typically for most things they received monthly billing. It also allows residents to identify potential leaks sooner, so their utility bills go up substantially. They have noticed much sooner with respect to utility leaks. And we felt it was just more manageable from a customer's or residents from a billing, from a budgeting perspective, that you get a monthly bill as opposed to a bigger bill every 2 months. And I understand as well it was just identified as an opportunity for improvement under the core services review that the city had undertaken 10 or 15 years ago with respect to billing practices.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lacy. To you, Madam Chair, again. That brings the question. When we talk about losses and leakage and all that, now that we are doing, the vehicle drives by and reads the meter, does that give us a better way, or does that give us an eye on if there is a leakage in the house from maybe even a dripping meter or a softener or taps or toilets? Does that give us a better readout to inform the residents that they have a problem if they complain about the higher water usage? Madam Chair?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, I might refer that question to Ms. Bryden. I know her staff deal with that regularly, or perhaps Mr. Doney, but we'll start with Ms. Bryden.
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, absolutely. The monthly readings do help identify high water usage in residents or in businesses. We do have a report that we review on a regular basis for each billing cycle. And certainly, I'll take this opportunity, the AMI project, once that is implemented, that will definitely help with the high water usage even quicker than a monthly cycle, and potentially will create an opportunity for residents to be able to check their own meter readings from their phones, for example, if we have an app that allows them to do that. So yes, short answer to your question, yes, monthly billing certainly helps with identification of leaks or repairs required to internal infrastructure in homes.
Okay, thank you. Another question, it goes to the, how much do we have in our reserve right now?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, so I'm sorry, I didn't bring that number with me, but my recollection is it's around 80 million or thereabouts, and that's a little bit above, I think, its maximum reserve limit. I think the important point I would make through you, Madam Chair, is that within the next 4 years, that's going to be down to about 20 or 25 million. And so how that reserve works is we have an annual operating budget, and we collect revenues through the utility billings. Part of those revenues go to daily operating costs or annual operating costs, and the rest really go to the reserve to fund capital infrastructure. And so it's kind of an ebb and flow. You can think of peaks and valleys. So we build up that reserve, then we have major capital investments that we make, and then that reserve gets drawn down. So right now, I would say the reserve is at a high point in that ebb and flow, and within the next 4 years, it'll be at a low point as we make planned investments.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. So then the question will go to in 2021, we will be discussing, which the comment was made about every 3 years we debate on utility rates increases or decreases. Scenario in 2021, if we want to put a little bit of a relief on the residents, would be just going into Q3 of 2021, maybe would be a, let's say, undertaking to look at what would that do if we stay at 0? Because we were at 9, then we went to 6, then we went to, I think it was 3, then we went to 2, and we came back up to 3. And I believe I asked that question before, and I think I did vote it to see if we can relieve a little bit of pressure and put this on 0. So if there's an answer or a comment now, I'll take it. If not, then if that could be put to the Q3 to say, what would this look like if we're going to be looking at in 2021 to go again for the 3-year increases? Either we stay where we are, we go lower, higher, or go to 0. What would that do to, the funds for us to operate, right? So,
Mr.
Madam
Lacy?
Chair?
So through you, Madam Chair, so I think as I've discussed with Council before, 3 years ago, Council approved a 3% mill utility rate increase for 3 years. 2021 is the last year of that utility rate increase. So hopefully I'm answering your question, Councillor, when I say that yes, as part of our budget planning for 2022, we'll be back in front of you in quarter 3, early quarter 4. With the 2022 budget process. And as part of that, we will have to come forward, talk about what we're recommending for utility rate increases going forward, whether that be another 3 years of pre-approved utility rate increases, or whether we move back to an annual utility rate increase. And certainly at that point in time, we would be providing, obviously have a discussion and be providing council with options about what that utility rate increase would be. And what the impact of either having a lower utility rate increase is or a higher utility rate increase in the upcoming year or over a specified time period. So I believe, Councillor, that to answer your question, we will be coming back with that discussion as part of next year's budget process, which will be through quarter 3 and early part of quarter 4.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I promise one last question. For us to, because processing and producing that glass of water is costing us quite a bit to get it to actually to the tap and to that glass. Just when I kind of hear getting a better source of water, meaning is we've always talked about getting a little bit more water through the from the defumaker into the Buffalo Pound. Because a couple of years ago we had a problem that we had 2 more days left of water because of Buffalo Pound is only 5 meter deep, and it's causing an issue. Having better water, would that improve? Well, I mean, anything better should be, but having better quality of source of water to treat, would that make a difference in the cost and delivery?
Yeah.
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe I'll just make a quick comment here, and then Mr. Doney might have some additional information. So, really, the sourcing of the water, the treating of the waters with the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Corporation, who is a municipal corporation of the city, along with the city of Moose Jaw. And whenever I've talked to them, they've always indicated that they believe, as far as volume of water, that the information they get from the province, which really monitors that stuff, is that they don't have any concerns long-term about volume of water. I think the bigger issue for the city of Regina is just the distance of our water sources and how far we got to basically pump the water to get it here to Regina, as we don't have any really locally available water source for that. Maybe I'll just ask Mr. Doney if he has additional comment.
Mr. Doney?
Through you, Madam Chair. Not a lot to add, just that a different water source at Buffalo Pound would not have a significant impact on the cost. As Mr. Lacy has mentioned, a significant portion of the cost is pumping it to City of Regina. So obviously there's conversations with the province about providing more flow to Buffalo Pound through the channel, but we don't see that as having a significant impact on the cost of water being delivered to our taps.
Great.
Okay, so if I may understand this, having the source of raw water for treating, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It will not change the what the cost would be then for delivery. So, like I say, if we get a pure water from directly 100% from defumaker and not drawing it from the Buffalo, it's not going to change the what it will cost us to produce that. Am I understanding this correctly?
Mr. Doney?
Through you, Madam Chair. So kind of just going back to the presentation is that 80% of our costs are fixed. So we will still need a treatment plant that can treat the water and pumps and pipes that can bring it to Regina. So there would be minor improvements in cost, but nothing significant because the majority of those costs are fixed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Zakidniak?
Hi, I just have one question, I think, and thank you for the presentation and all the information. So my question is about the report that's coming in Q3, I believe, of this year. So with the options to offset costs for low-income individuals, I'm interested in also hearing with that report options for that will also help conserve water. So I think those two, those two being considered together is important. And so whether that's all of the options consider that, or it includes options that can help make the water costs more affordable for low-income individuals, but also help conserve water. So this could be, through rebates or incentive programs for infrastructure that will help save water, those types of things. Could we include some of those options in that report as well?
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, we can, I might ask Ms. Bryden if she has a comment and perspective around that piece. I do know that a lot of the work that is being done around the new advanced metering system, I think provides a lot more opportunity for those type of things, as opposed to tying it to this particular report. And so I might suggest maybe that comes back as another undertaking with respect to, similar to Councillor Stevens' undertaking with respect to coming back once we have better systems and better information to be able to monitor and deal with those pieces. But with that, I might ask Ms. Bryden if she, what her perspective on that would be.
Ms. Bryden?
Actually, I think Mr. Doney's going to speak to that one.
Mr. Doney, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was just going to provide a bit of information about our water usage over the last number of years. So even though the City of Regina has grown, our water usage as a city has not increased significantly, primarily due to all the low-flow toilets and low-flow shower units. So our water usage per person has actually dropped significantly over the last number of years, primarily due to conservation that's happened naturally. I'm not saying that we can't bring something forward to incentivize that even more, but just something to be aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Zakidniak, does that answer your question?
Not completely, but thank you. Yes, I did see that, and I think that's great that water conservation has, that this is something that our city is seeing greater water conservation. Of course, it can always be better. I can even think about myself that, there's always room for improvement. With the AMI, isn't that the case that, when can we expect, though? I understand that provides more opportunities for conservation, but when can we expect information based on that technology? My understanding is we're a few years out from that. Is that accurate, through the chair?
Through
Yes.
you,
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Lacy?
that's correct. That's about a 4-year project.
So while I recognize that that will provide lots of opportunities, I feel that we could certainly find ways to incentivize water conservation in the meantime, in the next 3 years, and that, because we're already considering options to offset costs for low-income individuals, I would like to see how that can intersect with water conservation. So I'm still very interested in that being explored and those options being identified in that report in Q3.
Okay, thank you.
Is that possible?
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we will certainly take that into consideration when we're bringing that report back in Q3.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mole.
Yes, thanks. So thank you for this presentation. It was very good, very educational for me. I definitely understand much more how the process works. Mr. Lacey, you mentioned the capital reserve is around $80 million. And I remember you previously mentioned water meters getting done, and that's the main portion. And then I heard the pumping station as well was potentially coming up. Is that coming out without there, or did I misunderstand?
Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair, maybe I'll answer it, but I'm not sure. I'm getting to your question. So, the capital budget for utility includes many things. So, it does include replacement of water lines, includes replacement of sewer lines, upgrades to our drainage infrastructure. We have many areas of the city that do have drainage problems, so the significant investment is being made over the long term in making drainage improvements. And then there are other components like upgrading pumping stations, etc. Some of that is funded through utility rates. A portion of that is often funded through SAF charges, as Ms. Hauerloch indicated, because typically you're building bigger pumping stations because of growth, so part of that is just not a replacement portion. It's dealing with a larger population. And then there's, I would call, some ancillary pieces like water meters in businesses and residents' homes. And so the capital budget encompasses all of those pieces. And so when the utility model is developed, we look out 25 years and make estimates on what the state of our infrastructure is, the age of the infrastructure, what type of replacements have to happen. And then from that, you kind of work backwards from that to determine what your utility rates are and how you build up that reserve to basically fund those major investments as they happen. So I don't know if I've answered the question or not. If there's further clarification I can provide, certainly will do so.
You answered this question and my next one, okay? So through the chair, I understand the water rates, 35% of the revenue is from fixed rate, 65% is from variable rate. So I'm just curious in comparison to other cities, what does the city of Saskatoon do? That's probably the best comparison.
Who wants to take that one?
Me?
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Madam Chair. Based on the research that we have done to date, that 35-65% ratio is pretty common amongst municipalities. And again, it's just a matter of the makeup and yeah, it seems fairly common. I can't specifically say right offhand exactly what the City of Saskatoon's split might be, but it is fairly common across municipalities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mole. Mayor Masters.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. Information is very appreciated. I do have a question about the AMI, the Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Do you have a sense for other municipalities who have used this type of technology for the findings that come out of it, or is it just more of a more precise measurement of who's using what? Do you have any sense for other municipalities who have installed it, any lessons learned that they didn't perhaps know before?
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Madam Chair, so I might start and then Mr. Doney might add in. So we're currently working with a consultant who specializes in these types of projects, and they're bringing lots of information forward to us relating to lessons learned on municipalities that have gone ahead of us in terms of implementing the technology. So as we're going through the project, and as we're preparing to bring a report forward to council, we will be talking about some of those lessons learned for sure, and certainly including that information in our decision-making process.
I'll just add one thing that we've heard already through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
One thing we've heard through our consultant is one of the largest benefits is the engagement with customers. So now you're putting the power in their hands to understand what they're using for water. So if they flush the toilet, they could actually go to their phone and see their water meter go up. So you're able to allow customers to change their behavior if they choose to do that, to reduce their water consumption. That's one benefit that the consultant has shared with us already.
Okay, so sorry. I appreciate that because I think that leads into a little bit of what Councillor Zakidniak was just suggesting in terms of having some power over your own data and usage, and if you want to conserve, you'll actually be able to watch it. But, so we're investing in the AMIs. Is that the reason we're investing in them? This is kind of where I'm trying to get to, is we made a decision to spend the money to invest in them. The reasons for doing that were?
Mr. Doney?
Through you, Madam Chair, the primary reason that we're investing in new water meters is because the existing water meters are at the end of their life. So they're approximately 20 years old. So there's significant cost of new water meters. There is and as the technology changes, now that's referred to as AMI, Automated Meter Infrastructure. And so it's the additional infrastructure that comes along with the water meters. So the primary reason that we're investing is because the existing ones will fail at the end of their life. And so the added benefit is that we'll have the AMI portion, which allows us to have better track of water usage and put more information into customers' hands.
Okay, no, I'm good with that. Okay, so having said that, my next question is actually for Councillor Stevens. Councillor Stevens discussed, and actually Councillor Stanachek referenced it as well, in terms of somehow shifting the cost of water, which just costs money, from user, which seems to me to line more up with Councillor Zakidniak in terms of having some control over the use of water. Is there a reason for the question as to shifting the cost from the user drinking and flushing their toilet to a property tax base, which would be then landowners? Is there, what's the reasoning behind even questioning that? I'm curious.
Councillor Stevens?
Through the chair, yeah, my theory is, and based on my understanding of how the model works, is it would affect, or it effectively would be a way of addressing affordability. So high value assessed homes would pay more than lower assessed homes and properties. And it would be a way of just shifting the capital costs associated with water onto property taxes. My understanding and what I've seen in other municipalities is utilities typically are a form of regressive tax. We call it a user fee, but it is regressive. The other point here is that if you look at other infrastructure, you know, it's assessed the same way. If I don't ever use certain roads or freeways and so on, I don't save any money. So some of it is actually just the assumption that we would align how we pay for the basic infrastructure of water and sewer the same way we pay for other infrastructure. And then just the cost associated with you turning on your tap is what you would pay for.
So you're looking at it from a fixed versus variable, the fixed portion going to property tax because it's infrastructure, the variable rate going for user. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. I was just curious more or less. And my last question is actually, the word sustainability is used, which means different things to different people. But I'm actually not satisfied with the explanation for what is deemed to be sustainable. You've used a 25-year utility financial model, which is fantastic. And please, by my question, make no mistake, I appreciate financial modeling, which is making a reasonable and responsible approach to infrastructure investments. So don't misunderstand the question. I guess my question is, on a 25-year model, where's the balance between people paying now for what someone 20 years down the road gets to use, or is 25 years the right number? I hear it's correct for metering, but in terms of pipes, we have 100-year-old pipes, but we're putting that now on a 25-year model. Do you get where I'm kind of going with this, in terms of you pick 25 years basically for an amortization in order to fund a reserve fund, which now we're over the limit and we're going to deplete by 60 million for infrastructure investment. But are we burdening today's taxpayers on that 25-year model, maybe more than necessary, is my question.
Mr.
Through you, Madam Chair, I might ask Mr. Doney to make comment on that, as it's his team that does most of the work with respect to the model.
Thanks. Mr. Doney?
Through you, Madam Chair. Very good question. I would refer to that as intergenerational equity. I can comment on the work that we do to understand the system. So the financial model is a 25-year model. as you mentioned, though, pipes are 100 years in length. So our asset management plans look at the entire life of the assets, so out to 100 years. So we've got a network of 3,000 kilometers of pipe. When do they need to be renewed? We have a general sense of when they need to be renewed over those 100 years. With regards to plant renewal, so the wastewater treatment plant, for example, was renewed recently, and that funding was in the financial model for a period of time until the trigger was pulled and the actual money was spent. So it is a balance between putting what needs to be done in the first 25 years based on infrastructure, but not overburdening the financial model so that people today are paying for something that they'll never use.
Okay, and is part of the reasoning because we didn't have a reserve fund prior to however many years ago?
Mr. Doney? Or is that the
Through you, Madam Chair, so we've had a utility reserve for many years, but I don't know how long. The financial model has been in place for many years also, but I can't give you a full answer for that one.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I'm just not sure. So I think the reserve has been around for quite some time. So maybe I just ask for clarification with respect to, because I feel we're not answering the question. So,
Yeah, okay. No, and that's okay.
Sorry, Mr. Onright would like to chime
Yeah.
in. Go ahead, Mr. Onright.
Through the chair. So I'll maybe just add, so that a lot of our work today, what we look at is in 5-year buckets. So we're planning out 5 years, we require X number of dollars for capital plan. The 25-year model shows the impact, and we are doing a lot of assumptions. So in some of those assumptions, we're taking into consideration community growth through Ms. Howardluck's area. What are the development plans? Where are the growth areas? And what is the infrastructure required to meet that growth? And I'll maybe just touch on Councillor Moll's question around capital. So if you think of the East Pressure Zone, that's a $100 million project. That planning started a number of years ago. But the money had to be built up because there's going to be a portion that is direct tax funded and there's a portion that is SAF funded. But it's a $100 million project. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind also with the utility. This is a highly regulated area. Our wastewater is regulated, our drainage is regulated, and our freshwater is regulated. So we don't, if there is work that is required, we don't get an option to say, we're going to postpone that for 10 years and not do it. Right? We have to meet that regulatory compliancy in whatever area it's in. But our planning is essentially in 5-year buckets. We look out 5 years, build that plan, but we're always looking at 25 years to make sure the money is going to be there in each of those 5-year buckets as we move forward. Hopefully that helped kind of understand the utility itself. I don't know that I answered your question, Mayor Masters, but we certainly can do more work, if you require more information.
I don't need you to do more work, trust me. No, the question was if we have residents sitting at home going, my water bill is going to go up another 3% this year. Councillor Stevens had asked last executive committee, what would be the impact if we actually just froze that at 0? The question becoming, from a resident standpoint, yeah, we put on 3 years, which I love. I love that predictability of 3 years out. But we're north of the limit of the reserve fund. If I'm a citizen going, why are you increasing my tax when you have 80 million plus in the bank? And that's where I was going with this in terms of, we put it in the bank in order to invest in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure. And so to deplete it in any given year off the plan would mean that it may not be available in the next 5-year increments. That's where I was going. So you answered the question. Thank you.
Any more questions? Sorry. Mayor Masters, any more, or?
Nope, I'm good.
You're good? Councillor Moule?
The chair, you said there was savings for the wastewater treatment plant that was built several years ago. It's a P3 model, so I imagine there was some money that the city put in. How much did the P3 portion from the private, did they put in? And how much do we pay monthly or yearly on that fee?
Mr. Lacy, do you have that information, or?
So, through you, Madam Chair, I don't have with me how much we pay EPCOR yearly. It is governed by a multi-year contract.
Yeah.
We can certainly provide council with that information. It does fluctuate from year to year depending on the terms of the contract, because there are maintenance components built in, so some years there's more maintenance than others, as an example. Don't have that here, but certainly we can provide what the annual payment this year is. Secondly, with respect to the cost component, I think that you're referring to, I think you're, not to put words in your mouth, Councillor, but I think that refers to conversations that took place when council was originally deliberating what procurement methodology and how they wanted that plant to be built, right? And I do know there was a number of third parties involved in that assessment, and there was a decision that going with the current model resulted in savings over the model that had been in place before. And that was in the millions of dollars. I do not have that number here as well, but once again, that is certainly something that we can share with council members.
Okay, additionally, the water treatment plant that has to be built or added to or whatever, I don't know the scope yet. It seems to me that's a traditional build. We're going to be looking for money. They're going to be looking for money to build it, shared between the city of Moose Jaw and provincially, federally, whatever have you, okay? That's going to be a traditional build, not a P3, correct?
Mr. Lacy?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So I just want to be careful with words like traditional build.
Sure.
Because I think people have a different concept of that.
Yep.
So I would describe that one. So first off, I would say that the Buffalo Pond Water Treatment Corporation Board did explore basically all the different models available to it when it was making that investment decision. And the path at the end of the day that they thought made most sense for this plant upgrade, I would refer to it as design build. So what that is they basically articulated their needs. They went to the market and then they said to proponents, hey, you come tell us how you would design it, and then with the option of then you building that design. But basically we will fund, like you tell us what the price is and then we'll pay for that.
Yep.
So some might call that traditional, but traditional usually wouldn't have that design and build kind of tied together. So not a P3 like the wastewater treatment plant, it is a different procurement method.
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the design build, that's good. So this reserve that we keep talking about here, can we use some of that reserve money to pay for this rather than borrowing it?
Mr. Lacy?
So through you, Madam Chair, so the portion at the end of the day that the city will be responsible paying for that, because there is going to be substantial third-party funding from the other levels of government, will be our ownership share of the municipal portion that has to be funded by the plant. We will be coming forward with a report on how we're going to finance the municipal portion here, I would say within the next month. And that will look at the various options available to council to do that. I would come back to the fact that, I think perhaps that would be a better discussion to have when we bring that report forward. Because you'll see the broader, council will have the opportunity to have that discussion when we bring that report forward and how we'll finance it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I just have a couple of comments. Just on Councillor Stevens' comment about looking at different way of paying for it, moving it to more of the property tax. has for the fixed costs, has that been done in other municipalities that we know of?
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I'll ask Ms. Bryden if she
Ms.
has
Bryden,
any
or-
information, or Mr.
Would you- So I think Mr. Doney will
Mr.
answer
Doney, okay.
that one.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have specific details if the fixed costs have gone to the tax base, but I am aware that across different cities in Canada, some of the costs are on the tax base, and in some cities, all of the costs are on the tax base. So I don't know if it's gone down the road of specifically putting the fixed cost on there, but there is some split that has been predetermined that is on the tax base.
Thank you. So the report or the undertaking that Councillor Stevens has asked for, I would also appreciate the impacts from those cities and the outcomes that have impacted those by putting and increasing those fixed costs on the tax base. I would like to see both, the other sides of the impacts from that. And I'll just make a comment is that we have one taxpayer, and we continue to want to add this or, to the tax base. And when I look at fixed costs, I think of fixed costs as in, that's the piping that gets everybody water. I don't know why we, as a community, would want to say, well, let's just have put that on the tax so the larger homeowners would pay for more of that. Again, we all need that service. So, a point is that we have municipalities around this city that have a lot lower taxes, and I think we have to remember that if we want people to remain and we continue to hear that we have some of the highest taxes or higher taxes, I think we have to really, really be careful when we're looking at the fixed costs of infrastructure. In Councillor Zakidniak's comment, I appreciate the consumption, and I would like to ask, how do we, I would like to see more of what she's suggesting in consumption. And so can we, with the undertaking that she had asked, can we find out what other municipalities are doing and have that come back in the report as for incentives, not just for the low income, but for everybody across the city that we can do that for? That's what I would like to see. Can that be done?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we can include that, a survey type of thing across other cities to determine what they're using for conservation
Thank you very much.
practices.
That's all I have. Councillor Mancinelli?
Thank you very much. I only have one question. A term was mentioned in this, I believe it was generational equity. I was wondering if that's something administration tracks and compares over the years for the state of the city, has compared to years gone by.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Mr. Lacey, would you like to take that one?
Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair, I cannot say that we formally track that or have a mechanism to track it. I would certainly say that when it comes to budgeting for capital projects, looking at our long-term financial planning, that is a key principle and consideration point as we develop and put those plans together. But I would not say that we have a model where we can definitively provide a number to council around that piece.
Just to follow up, in conversations with residents and all the interested parties we get to meet as councillors, there's a recurring theme of how taxes continue to go up and the cost behind taxes. When I have meetings with administration and I get the information on the city and how we got to this point in time, that generational equity, I believe, comes into a big piece of the decisions we make and the burdens behind the taxes. I'd be interested if you can share some of that information in some type of concise manner, if you have the data to share it that way, just to help us give a little weight to the decisions we're making and make sure there's not assumptions of the state of the city as we live in it today compared to the past, and hopefully make it better for the future. Any questions and comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Okay, no, I don't see any more questions. I will ask the clerk to call a vote.
You just need someone to move.
Oh, can I have someone move, please?
I'll move.
Move the
Andrew.
report. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. I will begin with Councillor Stevens, please.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor?
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Findura,
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc,
In favor.
Councillor Shaw, Councillor Zahidniak,
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli,
In favor.
Councillor Mole,
In favor.
Mayor Masters,
In favor.
and Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Passes unanimously, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol. We'll now consider the EX 21-5, the sponsorship and naming rates and advertising policy. We'll let them, okay. I'll ask Ms. Folk to introduce the report.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. What's in front of you today is a formal policy for council consideration for the evaluation and entering into sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising agreements. And it's coming to you for consideration. Of course, naming rights and sponsorship agreements have the potential to foster new partnerships as well as generate revenue for the city. Of course, one of our community priorities in our official community plan is to achieve long-term financial viability, which includes searching for new ways to generate revenue. There has been a growing acceptance of naming rights and sponsorships, both within our community as well as other municipalities across the country. The program does provide an opportunity to develop a new revenue stream to fund important work to advance our community, as well as a consistent means to evaluate, negotiate, and approve sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising opportunities. Funds earned through the program will be credited to a specific revenue account as part of the general revenue and allocated by council through the budget process. So what we're looking for today is approval, consideration, and discussion in terms of moving forward with this formal policy. Of course, council did previously approve moving forward with development of this in end of November and approved operational funding in 2020. We were to bring back the policy for formal consideration just prior to program launch, and of course our team has been working diligently to get the program ready to launch in February. And with that, I myself, Ms. Svensson, and Mr. Nagin are available to answer any questions you might have.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Folk. So can I have someone please move the report?
I'll move it, Jason.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. Any questions?
Yes, actually, I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I noticed this report is to gain sponsorship in dollars for the city. In reading it, I noticed cannabis and alcohol were treated quite differently in how they were allowed to participate in this. I'm wondering why that is, and especially with cannabis being a new venture and something that's grown in the stock market quite widely in the first 2 years, and probably a lot of opportunity for investment and expansion.
Ms. Folk?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Very good question. At this point, the federal government has strong regulations in regards to cannabis, and at this point, federally, we're not able to allow advertising for cannabis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stevens?
That actually answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc?
Yeah, I'm actually just on the list to move an amendment to this document when it's the appropriate time. So if that's now, I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Do we, sure, I don't see anyone else. Oh, actually, there are, do we want to let other people speak first? Sure, if you're prepared to move it, sure, I guess we can do it now then.
Great. So I would move an amendment to insert at item 4.3.3.8, reading, whose business is principally derived from the sale or production of fossil fuels.
Do you want him to repeat that? For sure. Mr. Nichol?
Thank you. So Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor LeBlanc, I'm assuming then that what you are specifically asking for is a further restriction as outlined in the policy. So when you are listing 4.3.3, you want to add one additional one with respect to fossil fuels, correct? So you're making an amendment that the policy have an additional restriction, just so that we're clear on where this goes. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you for that clarification. We'll just let Amber get it up here. Sure. Councillor LeBlanc, can you please restate it for the clerk?
Absolutely. So it would be at point 8 of that subsection, and it would read, whose business is principally derived from the sale or production of fossil fuels.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just confirm with the clerk that she has it, and then she can put it up.
So now if you want to speak to it, then
Yeah,
you can
well,
ask him.
we need a seconder though.
No, not in
Oh,
committee.
oh, we don't, oh, okay, good. So Councillor Blanc, would you like to speak to it, please?
Absolutely, thank you. So from my perspective, what this restriction section found at 4.3.3 really comes down to is the difference between company advertising in the city and the company sponsoring one of our buildings. I think this is most clearly laid out at 4.1.3 of the document. It says, sponsorships are associative in nature and therefore alignment to predetermined city values is necessary. I think that's the very reason why, we don't want sex, drugs, and rock and roll being advertised on our buildings. I think given this council's direction, I think quite courageously, quite strongly, that we are concerned about environmental sustainability. We are concerned about the amount of carbon used in our city. I think it is similarly or more inconsistent for us to have buildings and parks named after fossil fuel corporations than it is for us to be named after a pack of smokes. I think we can see that inconsistency quite clearly in that, we talk about sustainability in all of our meetings, and it's not just Councillor Zahidniak that's doing that. It's the rest of us too, and we campaigned on it. I think because having a city asset named after yourself does imply some city tolerance, at least, of what you do, and to some extent city acceptance of what you do, we cannot allow that to happen with fossil fuel companies who it is in their financial interest to continue pushing the continued use of carbon-heavy technologies, carbon-heavy fuel sources. We need to distance ourselves from that and not allow them to gain legitimacy through their association with us. And I think it's important that we do that. I anticipate there may be some comments back that says, Saskatchewan workers, oil and gas, people on the rig, working hard, those are good Saskatchewan jobs. I think that's entirely true. I think obviously governments need to take steps to protect those workers and those jobs. But that's just as true about alcohol production or cannabis or tobacco production. Frontline blue-collar workers doing that work, same as oil and gas production. It is entirely possible for us to distance ourselves from the companies producing those things while still standing with the employees and the families who rely on that. So I don't think we need to pick one or the other. But in terms of picking between sustainability and continued carbon-heavy energy sources, I think we do need to make a choice. And I think we've decided that already. We just need to follow through with it. by saying we won't be directly associated with those fossil fuel companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Findura, were you wanting to speak to the amendment?
I did, yeah, but Councillor LeBlanc explained it clearly. So the questions I had, he actually explained what the intent is, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. The clerk does have it up on the screen, so you can read the amendment. Councillor Moule.
The motion, it was just in regards to the regular report.
Oh, okay, sorry. Mayor Masters, is yours to the regular report or is it to the amendment?
I'm going to think about whether or not I speak to the amendment.
Okay, great. Okay, Councillor Mancinelli.
Mine is to the amendment. I didn't think I'd be the guy defending a fossil fuel company, and I don't mean to, but I realize a lot of these companies have transitioned from a fossil fuel company or a gas company to an energy company, and part of that transitioning is rebranding and advertising, and we're trying to gain revenue from this. I was just wondering if there's any thoughts on that line of thinking, and if it'll be affected through this amendment through the chair to Mr.
Sorry, Councillor Mancinelli, was that for Councillor Moule?
Yes, I believe LeBlanc.
Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor LeBlanc, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Mancinelli. I think you're exactly right. Some of these companies are trying to pivot to better sources of energy. I think we don't want to discourage those companies, and that's why I put in the proposed wording the phrase, so business is principally derived or majority derived from da-da-da, and that's different than the way that tobacco or cannabis is sold. So as I read those ones, if you sell marijuana 1% of the time, and do charitable works 99%, you're still cut. I think that wouldn't apply here. We'd be talking about companies that are majority fossil fuel. And I think you are right. It would catch some companies that are transitioning to better energy. We could look at someone like Shell, who's, 1% renewable energy, and maybe they'll be 2% by next year. They would be nixed by this. And, maybe that's a bit overbroad, but I think on aggregate it works out to say, in a world we live in, it's hard to get away from burning carbon altogether, no doubt. But people who are majority not doing that, I think, can get their names on our stuff, and we'd love to be associated with them.
I guess that'd be incentive too in that fact. So yeah, thank you for the answer.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Oh, Mayor Masters.
I'm struggling with, if someone actually wants to convert to biofuel, it's still principally fossil fuel, even though it's biofuel. So someone like the Federated Co-op goes about a conversion, which is the only way they're going to stay alive 7 years from now anyways. But the Federated Co-op could not possibly make the list of sponsoring something with the city of Regina because principally, even at 80%, they're dependent on fossil fuel. I just feel it's a bridge too far when the city still has the right to deny someone who they seem to be particularly egregious. So if Husky Oil wants to do it and they're not moving anything towards, pick something, and they're actually the leaders in ethanol at a time, that we wouldn't consider taking funding from them because principally they make money off of fossil fuel. I'm sincerely struggling with this because this is like a long way away, and yeah, I'm really struggling. I just think that the city still has the right to make the decision, and if a gas company is going to give us a check for over $100,000, it's up to council to vote on it anyways. So it's overly prescriptive in terms of a policy when it could come forward and be something else. Anyways, those are just my comments on it. I'm having a hard time comparing Shell with sex work. I'm having a hard time. And to me, we know where we're located, and if we're a spot that could be open to production of biofuel, which again would still be principally fossil fuel going in, it's additives creating biofuel to reach global standards, we're going to say, yeah, we don't like what you do. I don't know. Someone else can speak to it, but that's my position.
Thank you, Mayor Masters. Councillor, no. Councillor LeBlanc, were you wanting to respond to that?
I was.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So I just direct councillors to it's repetitive, 5.1.1.1 of the policy says not all of these namings are coming through council. That only happens if it's 100 grand or more. So we could end up with some presumably ironically named Husky Center for Sustainability worth 99,000 and never see it. So I think it's worth being a bit prescriptive at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Councillor Stadnicek?
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion primarily because, well, I mean, I do think that we do need to start moving off fossil fuels. And in terms of advertising, it's not a question of if you support the industry or not, but whether or not you want to be promoting the industry or feel beholden to the industry. So in terms of advertising and sponsorship rights, I don't think that we want to be, as we're trying to move towards sustainability, moving off fossil fuels, I think it makes sense. Otherwise we could have, if we had some building or some facility named after if it's Shell Oil or another company, that sponsorship could last for 25 years. At a time when we're trying to be moving to become more carbon neutral in our city. So I didn't prepare any notes because I didn't know this was coming up, but I do support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stadnicek. Councillor, okay, Councillor Shaw?
Madam Chair, I absolutely do not support this at all. I had no idea that this was coming up. And I want to add to Mayor Masters' comments, and until we're ready to live in a house with no lights and we all are riding buses, I don't believe that these people that want to give to us and contribute to our community in so many other ways should be penalized because of what they do when we actually use and need what they do. At this time, I do not believe that this is a good move on our part as council. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the direction of this amendment. I also share the mayor's concern that it may be overbroad. I wonder, for consideration by the mover of the amendment, something like this, and it may fit under 4.3.2 and then a .1. The city will not solicit or accept sponsorship or advertising that promotes the sale or production of fossil fuels. I wonder if that captures both the mover of the amendment's direction and takes account of the mayor and others' concerns that we don't want to discourage a company from advertising, say, that they are converting to X number of percentages of wind power, or something like that. I'd appreciate, Madam Chair, the mover's reaction to that and whether this amendment can't be rejigged in terms of wording to accept this as a friendly amendment to the amendment.
Councillor LeBlanc?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a fair suggestion. My hang up with it is that the language then might be a bit narrow. So if it only stops, namings and so on that promote fossil fuel use and whatnot. My concern is whether a park named after Husky Energy, what that implicitly does. And I think part of what that implicitly does is say, the city is on board with these folks. And so what I think that does maybe is it's inherently promotive of Husky's business, Husky's products, which may be some amount of wind and some amount of oil. And so I think the naming itself, just the name Husky, for example, has enough in it that it's implicitly promoting all of Husky's business. And so I just don't know that the amendment catches as much as I think it ought to. But it could be that I've misunderstood Councillor Hawkins on that. So I'd be happy to hear if he has a response to it and if he disagrees with the way I've framed that.
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, there's a delicate balance here. You don't want to punish companies who are actually trying to move into the sustainable energy field. And companies do advertise themselves as doing that. I just think it's a delicate balance, and I'm not sure we've captured it by the amendment in the sense that we're not here trying to prevent companies from doing good things from advertising. What we're trying to do is prevent advertising of certain commodities like the production and sale of fossil fuels. I'm not sure I can add anything further to that.
Councillor LeBlanc?
Yeah, I appreciate that thoughtful response, Councillor Hawkins. I think at this point I will not willingly amend the terms of the proposed amendment, but I thank you for the good suggestion, frankly.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to make my comments. Councillor Moll, sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead. I'll make mine after you. Go ahead.
Probably a question for Mr. Hawkins. So if this gets voted down, Mr. LeBlanc's motion, will you, Mr. Hawkins, then hand in your motion the way you've worded it?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead.
The answer to that question is if Mr. LeBlanc's motion gets voted down, I will move an amendment along the lines that I suggested, and I think it would fall into 4.3.2 and then a sub 1.
Did he say? Sorry, I wasn't sure. Councillor Hawkins, you said then you will, if this fails, you will move a motion. Is that what I heard clearly?
I will move an amendment along the lines that I suggested.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc, oh, no, sorry. I'd like to respond and then you'll be able to have the final say. Councillor LeBlanc, okay? So just my comments. Councillor LeBlanc, can you give me some examples of the companies that you're talking? We've heard the Co-op, we've heard Husky Oil, we've heard Shell, we've heard, what other companies? Because this paints, for me, the brush can be, could get very confusing.
Sure, yeah, I admittedly have limited knowledge of fossil fuel companies, but I think it would include, local producers also. So you might think about, a small landowner in southeastern Saskatchewan, around Estevan, that wants to do something about it. I think it may well catch someone like Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, advertising, lobbyist groups, groups like that. I think, largely gas stations would be caught. So Esso might have a hard time, Petrocan might have a hard time, those sort of entities. But I think it would largely be those who are in the direct production and sale of it, which is to say it wouldn't catch consumers of it. So simply because a particular business principally runs on the SAS power grid and uses dirty energy sources doesn't mean they're prohibited from it. It's about the production side of this thing. Thank you.
I guess that's my next point is, I guess we're all guilty in this because we use that energy. That's the concern I have with the motion here is that, and I'm going to ask administration here, what are your thoughts on this? And what have you, in your research in doing this, have you heard from other municipalities that have utilized the oil and gas industry as sponsors? Ms. Folk?
Through you, Madam Chair. Of course, excellent points, and when we look at the impact, and I know when we're looking at the energy and sustainability file and looking at community action plan in terms of to get us to renewable 2050, our engagement process related to that is to ensure that everyone in the community has a voice, including industry, as they make that just transition. So when we look at impact, as described, it would have an impact in terms of entering in sponsorship and joint agreements with SAS Power and Sask Energy, as well as a number of significant industry drivers within our community. So from that perspective, it would have a significant impact on the ability to generate revenue, as well as build positive relationships. Much of the work that we're proposing here around sponsorship, naming rights, and advertisement is relationship-based. Quite often, it'll take anywhere from 18 to 24 months from those initial conversations with organizations to getting to the point where you have that agreement. I also would like to point out, I know the policy does address sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising. Every time we're looking at naming a building or entering into an agreement, those would be coming forward to council for consideration. So high level, happy to answer any other questions from there. Before I end though, because I had one last point that I do want to make, you will notice that we are scheduled to bring an information report back to council in December 2021. And because this is a new policy, we are recommending actually a policy review annually as well. So as our team is going out and having conversations in 2021, assessing impacts of COVID, looking at where those opportunities are, we would bring forward any recommendations in December around policy alterations. So this is one area, should council choose for us to pay attention to when we look at bringing that policy review forward in December, that we'd be more than happy to do.
Thank you for that. So just, and I understand the intent for this amendment, but I will not be able to support it. And just for the reasons stated from administration, then I would agree that we are 30 years out from a 2050 renewable city. And I understand that we have to do our part, but these are employers, people who live in our city, they're taxpayers, and we're going to say to them, you cannot sponsor or give money to community a building, but I'll tell you, it'll end in the community associations and the community groups that they give to too. This would be, I believe, we want to build the bridges, and I believe that this would really tear those down, and the way that we work and embrace our community. This would be something that I think would not be viewed in the public eye very well as a council decision. So I'm sorry, I will not be able to support this amendment. Councillor Zakidniak, is this on the amendment?
It is, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just have a few comments. I think I plan to support this amendment, and there's a few reasons why. I think that this is a good opportunity for us to show leadership in this area, especially because we will be, administration will be reporting back to us in Q4, as mentioned. So I think it is, this is an opportunity for us to take a leadership position in an area that we've already identified as a priority for our city and on our council. And if it turns out that we made a mistake or that we need to walk it back or something like this, we have the opportunity to have that discussion this year. I think oftentimes our city, we hesitate to take, not always, but sometimes we rely on what are the best practices in other cities. This is an opportunity for us to demonstrate leadership and be bold and try something out. It's like a pilot project. So I do think it's a good opportunity to do that. And also, my understanding is, and this is a question for clarifications, so this is currently revenue that we aren't generating. Is that accurate? This is a new source of revenue.
Ms. Folk?
Chair, that is correct.
Okay, so we won't be losing revenue by the companies that we decide that should be those opportunities that we decide should not be a part of this policy. So I think now is the time to set the bar higher and see what sponsorship opportunities we get as a result. And it also sends the message that we are serious about what we have committed to. And this is an easy, concrete step that we can take to encourage companies and incent and to move towards renewable energy. And for those that are, that it's because it says those who are primarily getting their revenue from fossil fuels, it still opens up the opportunity for those who are, the majority of their revenue is not from fossil fuels. And it also, for those who are making that transition, it gives an opportunity for us to like incentivize that change, and also to when people are doing that to show our appreciation for their efforts. So I see this as a low risk opportunity for us to take a strong leadership position. That's all for the amendment.
Do you want to get to speak once on the amendment? Okay. All right, I see nothing further. We will call actually, Councillor, sorry. Right. So, Councillor LeBlanc, do you want to close your further comments on your amendment?
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah, so 2 points. The first is the suggestion that these folks buying naming rights might be doing us a favor by doing that. I think it's clearly marketing based. I think the policy sets that out at 3.1, quote, sponsorship is a marketing based activity and essentially not philanthropic. I think that's obvious. Folks aren't doing it to do us a favor. Folks are doing it because it's good marketing, and I think that's a live point here. The second one I'd make, just in response to a few comments about the fact that we're not currently phased off fossil fuels, the fact that it's a long-term goal, 2050 and so on, and as I understood it, essentially why rush that today or raise concerns with it today. I would just differentiate this from, alcohol in some ways. So think of the fact that alcohol is banned. As I understand it, we don't have a 2050 plan to re-implement prohibition and to go back to it. So we haven't said that's a bad thing in our society that we're working to get out. Yet we have said that implicitly for these carbon-heavy energy sources. And so I think if those on 4.3 sub 3 are justified, which we're not actively campaigning against, we don't actively have city plans to route out. This one is all the more so. And I think just the final point is, I think there's no disrespect or no dishonor intended to employees in these areas if we do say we're not taking the money from their employers. In the same way, we're not saying SLGA workers are bad because we're not letting alcohol be a prime name sponsor. So I think it's entirely possible to say we don't agree with the promotion of the product, we respect the workers, and this is part of how we move forward. It might cost us some lost money, but that's sometimes the cost of being courageous and living out your ideals. I think our ideals are pretty clear. The question's just, what are we going to do about them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. Mr. Clerk, call the question, please.
Thank you. With respect to the amendment put forward by Councillor LeBlanc, I will begin with him, please.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor?
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
Opposed.
Councillor Findura.
Opposed?
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor?
Councillor Mancinelli.
I am.
Councillor Mancinelli.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Moule.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
Opposed.
Councillor Bresciani.
Opposed.
The amendment is carried 7-4, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the main motion. Councillor Findura, you were back on the list at the top. Sorry? Okay. So Councillor Findura?
That was just to the amendment, or
Okay.
that was it.
Thank you. Councillor Moule?
Okay, I just wanted to thank everybody, mainly the previous city council and obviously who generated the report. It's great that we're developing this sponsorship, naming rights, and advertising program. And it's also great to see another revenue source for the city, for the taxpayers. Thank you very much. Also, I'm hoping I can pre-book some land if possible for 9th Avenue North through Pasco Street North for my 2024 re-election sign. That'd be good too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Moule. Mayor Masters? Go ahead. Mayor Masters?
No, oh, sorry, no.
No, nothing?
No.
Okay. Did you say anything? Okay, don't see anything. Okay, Councillor Zakidniak, did you want to speak to the main motion?
Sorry, yes, I did. So I, just looking at my notes here. So I would be interested in seeing alcohol regulated the same as tobacco and cannabis, because right now it says that for alcohol, the restriction is just for at venues primarily geared to children or youth. So that's the restriction with alcohol. So my position on that is, because alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis are all they're all legal substances that, have addictive properties. I think that it would make sense to, however we do it, to regulate all three of those the same. So if I could get a response from administration regarding that.
Ms. Folk?
Through you, Madam Chair. Of course, the policy was built and based on practices in other cities, including Saskatoon, Vancouver, and I think there are, just going 2 seconds, outlined in the report on page 2. Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, and Toronto. So based on those organizations, and of course the advertising guidelines set by the marketing and advertising guidelines in Canada have been established, and there are regulations in place that outline that, and that is the basis of the recommendation. Again, we can adjust the policy based at the will of council. Having said that, again, this is a piece that will have an impact, and we will report on the revenue impact when we come forward in December.
Councillor
Okay,
Zakiniak?
I appreciate that. I'm not sure how I wish to proceed, or if I wish to proceed with anything different at this time, but in my mind, our regulations for all of those substances should be equal. So I suppose that maybe I can, if somebody else wishes to speak, maybe I'm just going to give that some thought. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? I have just one. Just in regards to, we did talk about when this report came, and we talked about it, we talked about hiring one individual to go out and kind of be the key person. How is that going to work now with Citizen Services taking it over, and how will that process work through the?
Through you, Madam Chair. So we did engage a manager in 2020. The council did approve this program and budget to go with it in the 2020 budget process. The intent was that as the program grew, so if we flash back to the conversation on the floor of council in November, the intent was there were revenue targets that we were working towards achieving. As we were meeting those revenue targets, we were going to continue to add to the team to make sure that we were able to fulfill requirements associated with sponsorship and naming rights. Of course, the intent is for that program to be self-funding. We've been doing assessments of impacts related to COVID-19, and we are seeing agreements coming to fruition within the community in this space. So we're projecting for this year and 2022 that there would be a net, so positive revenue gain in the range of $100,000 and $250,000, so up to $250,000. As those relationships are built out, and of course this was the next step in the process was to get this policy in place so we could launch the program for February and start to go out and build those relationships and enter into those agreements, knowing that they take 18 to 24 months out. So based on some of the policy shifts and adjustments, I can guarantee that the revenue projections will shift substantively, and that is a piece that we will endeavor to bring back in December.
Thank you. Just in regards to if someone wants to donate $250,000 or $500,000, how does that play out in the type of building that they may get? So if we're going to build a new pool, how would that work for the naming rights? Is it the size of the building? Like how would that be determined?
That's an excellent question, Madam Chair, through yourself. Of course, those are usually result in a number of months of ongoing conversations and negotiations that are addressed. We have our manager who comes with us with much experience in the sponsorship, advertising, and naming rights area. There is also a bit of a science to calculating that number. He is very familiar with that, and he can probably speak a little bit more to the details around that. Just want to reiterate again that most naming right deals range anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending on the agreement and the arrangement with the partner that you end up entering into the conversation and discussion with. Of course, the policy also does outline a number of steps that we would take, including ethical scans, ensuring that there's alignment with our corporate values, our priorities, et cetera, and moving forward on those elements. Anything when it comes to naming of a building proper would come to council for consideration, and then any agreement past a 5-year time period would also come to council for consideration. I might ask Mr. Nigan if he has any more details that he can share with executive committee around assessing value of sponsorship, specifically around naming rights.
Thank you. Mr. Nigan?
Hi, good morning. First, thanks everyone for letting me be here. Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I think Ms. Volk hit the nail on the head with a lot of the components there. One of the big things when looking at, especially when it comes to naming rights of facilities and the overall price that's attached to it, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Some of the things that we look at with not just putting a name on the building, but that company or that organization's activation, if you will, their ability to activate on that naming rights to really enhance the experience of the user groups using that facility. And there are numerous examples throughout Canada even of other named facilities. And so we really use a lot of those models to see kind of the overall size of the facility, what other, I guess, municipalities have received for similar rights in the past when it comes to naming those. And then it's really working again through that collaborative approach with some of the other departments in the city through our leads clearances to identify potential partners for those areas, and then working on building that relationship with that potential client. And that's where that 18 to 22 months really comes in, because it's really about putting that entire package together to represent everything, and then of course bring it to council for final approval. And then it's really working again through that.
Thank you, that's all I have. So we have Councillor Hawkins.
Identify potential partners for those areas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am going to refer to 4.2.1.6, which says all political advertising must indicate that it is paid by a party or candidate to avoid any impression that the city is supporting any particular party or candidate. My concern is that that doesn't go far enough. My concern is, in fact, that the city, on city property, we should not be advertising political parties or political candidates. I think it will inevitably lead to the very impression that that 4.2.1.6 is concerned about, and that it will leave the impression that somehow the city endorses some candidate or some party. So to that end, I would like to move an amendment, and the amendment would come under 4.3.1, I guess, and renumbered .3, but I leave the numbering to others. And the amendment is just simply that the city will not solicit or accept sponsorship or advertising from any political party or political candidate.
Councillor Hawkins, can you just repeat that again, please?
Yes, I can. That the city will not solicit or accept sponsorship or advertising from any, sponsorship or advertising from any political party or political candidate.
Political party. So he's just adding on to the 4.3.3. He's just adding on to the 4.3.3. Yeah, So Councillor Hawkins, you're just adding on to the 4.3.3. Is that right? Like it reads the same way.
Yeah, where I think it really falls is 4.3.3, and then the current point, 4.3.3 would be labeled 4.3.4. But I'm not concerned about where it is so much as I'm concerned about the idea that the city must be and appear to be neutral when it comes to political parties or candidates.
Okay, good. We've got that down. They'll figure out where that will go. We have an amendment on the floor. Does anyone want to speak to it?
Madam Chair, I didn't have a chance to put my, into the chat. I'm a little slow on the switch here. Can I add a comment or question?
Yes, is this to the amendment, Councillor Findura?
Yes, yes.
Yes, please do. And if I can just ask councillors, if you do want to put your name in, just put it attached and put amendment beside it. It just makes it, because we've got a whole list of names and it's either to the main motion or the amendment. Go ahead, Councillor
Okay,
Findura.
thank you. Just a question to the mover, Councillor Hawkins. Eliminating all of the parties, my thoughts is that if one advertise, 2 or 3, whatever they are, can advertise at the same time, or are you just talking about any government, any political parties advertising? Is that the intent?
Through you, Madam Chair, my intent would be that no political party or no political candidate could advertise, because as I said, I fear it leaves the impression that somehow the city is not completely neutral in these circumstances. And that's especially true given that some political parties and some political candidates will have monetary resources for advertising that are much greater than others.
So, to you, Madam Chair, I just want to kind of get myself wrapped around this. So if I'm looking at let's say an MLA or MP on a billboard or on the portable sign on the property somewhere, advertising in the area that they represent, is that what we're talking about, or am I thinking something different? Madam Chair?
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm thinking that advertising that says, my name is John Jones, vote for me. My party is the ABC party. It's wonderful, vote for it. So what we normally think of as political party or political candidate advertising.
Okay. Madam Chair, just as I'm asking, so then when it comes to the election time, is that going to eliminate how that works, or that's totally different?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes, go ahead.
It would eliminate political advertising both during the election time and outside the election time. It would eliminate vote for me, vote for us kind of advertising.
So then that just leads to another question, Madam Chair, through you, and then that would then eliminate any kind of, at the election time for council, school board, would that catch that part as well, Madam Chair?
Councillor Hawkins?
Madam Chair, thank you. These are interesting questions. This would be subject, of course, to provincial and federal election advertising law, which may have an impact. But apart from that, yes, it would eliminate political advertising from municipal candidates, school board candidates, provincial, federal candidates.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, Councilor Hawkins. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I need some clarity. Mr. Holden, could you chime in here, please? And put you on. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll start, and then I might ask Mr. Nicol as our Chief Returning Officer. But this is about the sale in terms of advertising for political parties. So this will not impact the ability of a candidate during a municipal election or a provincial election to knock on someone's door and say, I want to put a lawn sign in front of your house. Right now, we do not accept that type of advertising or those types of lawn signs on city property. So there's a definite distinction. One is through advertising sponsorship. This basically says that we will not accept sponsorships. But to Councilor Findura's comment, the normal process of candidates promoting themselves or their party, that won't change in terms of what you see. It just will not be allowed on city property, and it isn't today.
I understood that you could not put a sign for an election sign on city property anyway.
That is correct.
Okay. Any further questions? I can't see the chat. Is there anybody else to the amendment? Councillor Zakidniak.
Thank you. So when I'm looking at, first I want to say that I accidentally put a comment in the meeting chat, so I'm sorry for that. That was not a few moments earlier, so sorry, my apologies for that. But so when I look at the requirement section 4.2.1, or sorry, it's actually Councillor Hawkins, I think this is specific to section 4.2.1.6. Please correct me if I'm wrong. All political advertising must indicate that it is paid by a party or a candidate to avoid any impression that the city is supporting any particular party or candidate. So that's in the current policy. Is that the part you're referring to, Councillor Hawkins?
Madam Chair, through you, if I might, I use 4.2.1.6 as stating a principle. I'm concerned that 4.2.1.6 does not go far enough because it indicates that a party or candidate can advertise if they've indicated that it's paid for by them. I would go further in this amendment and say no advertising from political parties or candidates.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I support this amendment. One of the things that I think is one of the reasons that I decided to run municipally is because of the fact that municipal politics is not affiliated with political parties. And I think that that is an important component of our of how things work in our community, that we should ensure that this new policy is adhering to those principles and promoting our lack of affiliation with political parties. I agree with Councillor Hawkins that the current phrasing in the proposed sponsorship policy leaves the opportunity for political parties to advertise, and yes, there would be some notation that that it would indicate that it's paid for a party, but that doesn't distance us enough from the political party structure, which we have consciously as a municipality separated ourselves from, and I think there's very good reasons for that. So I agree that it doesn't go far enough, and I think we need to maintain that objectivity and distance from the political party system. So thank you for that amendment, Councillor Hawkins, and I do plan to support it.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment?
I'm sure. I think I just put my name in chat there. I just want to make a comment on the amendment, please.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Through you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Mr. Holzer mentioned that, and we know that no political, civic, school board, any advertising is or will be accepted on the city properties. So if we're talking about not permitting any political signs, so at least another question to you, Madam Chair, to perhaps the administration is that, so then if it's not allowed or permitted to be on the city properties, then it's on a private property or properties or private billboards. How is this amendment going to work or not work on the 4.2.1.6? If you want to add substance or more different process to it, to Madam Chair.
Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This amendment doesn't affect private property at all. It's in line with what the city manager has said, It just simply says that you can't have political party or candidate advertising under this policy at all, rather than, as it currently stands, saying that you can do it if you indicate who's paid for it. So really, the amendment is entirely in line with the attitude of the city in the past, and I hope going forward that it doesn't want to be associated with any particular party or candidate under any circumstances, that it wants to maintain the appearance of absolute neutrality in these kinds of political matters.
Okay, yeah, I'm just, through Madam Chair, I'm just struggling, because if we are not allowing to any paid advertising on the city properties, then I'm not quite sure how this fits or how this is going to alter or change. So I'm just struggling with the what that will do with the 4.2.1.6 if we as a city already not accepting any paid advertising. That means on the city property, or do we accept paid advertising some other way? Digital or through Facebook and all that other stuff. Well, Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, through you, it would eliminate 4.2.1.6 and put in its place a ban on a political candidate or party advertising on city property, on the property that this policy applies to. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that.
Can I hear from Mr. Nichol, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment that Councillor Hawkins beat me to the punch there. I think that I agree with him. The intent of his amendment will essentially remove the existing 4.2.1.6 and essentially make it more stringent. Am I correct, Councillor, that when we write, the minutes would indicate that that section, current section, would be eliminated and replaced with what you are now putting in? Have I got that correct?
Councillor Hawkins?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's exactly correct, and perhaps in my amendment I should have said that 4.2.1.6 will be eliminated and replaced by.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We'll reflect that.
I have a question just on the amendment, Councillor, for the city solicitor, if he's here, or city manager, whoever wants to take it. In regards to the city billboards that we have, how does this work then on those? So if we have contracts, does that mean that, so if people want to put their face up there during the election, that they would not be able to do that? Or a Merry Christmas or a greetings or anything like that? City Manager, Mr. Holden?
I'll start and then I might have Ms. Folk add. So, I think we're being very clear here that we are not selling political advertising on city property. We do have instances, our transit advertising contract, for example, they follow the Canadian advertising standards in terms of what they accept and will not accept. So obviously if council passes this, then we'll have to, when we have conversations with Pattison, for example, we'll have to bring this into the conversation, right? They do our bus advertising and they do some of our billboard advertising. There are instances where we lease land to some of the major digital billboard companies. Obviously they manage those advertisements. So it can get a bit, confusing or gray. So if council does not want to see advertising at all, I think it's a difference between a city building or city land outside a city building versus, maybe a small parcel of land that the city owns where we're leasing land to, a billboard advertiser, or in the case of what ends up on city buses. So we'll just have to make sure that whatever you pass, we'll make sure that as those contracts come up, if there is language that allows that kind of advertising today, and I don't think it is because you don't see those types of advertisements, we'll then have to have conversations as those contracts come up for renewal. Yeah,
I just want to be clear before we do vote though, or before, so I can understand that if there's a political, is running in the next election and they want to put their, up there on the billboard, is that going to be allowed if this passes? That's the question I have.
So the answer would be not if the city is selling that advertising. So if we're selling that advertising directly, we're not going to do that because this new requirement would say we don't do that. We would have to look at our agreements that we have with some of the other advertisers that we either lease space to or we have contracts with to see if that is allowed.
Thank you.
But clearly the direction is we're moving away from having political advertising, and we don't really do that. I mean, the example may be that, you know, if the Saskatchewan Party came out with a new slogan
Yes.
to promote Saskatchewan, they may purchase billboards around the community that say Saskatchewan Party, you know,
Yes.
the Saskatchewan Advantage, what have you. Those are the types of things that we would consider under our current agreements, I think, that we have in place, but we're not allowing on the billboards that the city owns right now or manages to have, you know, vote for Scott Moe or vote for
Yes.
Lori Bresciani.
Yes, okay. Mr. Weary, did you want to respond? I saw you there. Just for clarity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the advertising part of this policy, just want to advise the committee, I will be providing some legal advice on that specific issue between now and the council meeting when this is considered, but I would prefer not to get into the discussion about it in the public meeting today. There is some case law and some background on this particular issue that I think would be helpful to members of council prior to final consideration of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we won't have that information up until council, so I'll let Councillor Hawkins, you heard what Mr. Weary has indicated. Go ahead.
Well, I'd ask for council support for this amendment. I know no legal impediment. If there is one, it'd be easy enough to adjust when the matter comes before council. But for the time being and to get this before council, I would ask for support for this amendment. The only other comment I'd make that hasn't been made so far is that this is not in any way censorship. There's all kinds of advertising space that isn't city advertising space or sponsorship space that's available, so that there's lots of opportunity for political candidates and parties to get their message out without the city being implicated and having its neutrality possibly brought into question.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Okay, seeing no further, I'll ask the clerk to take the vote.
Thank you. With respect to Councillor Hawkins' amendment, I will begin with Councillor Hawkins, please.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
Opposed.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
Opposed.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
Opposed.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
Opposed.
Councillor Bresciani.
Opposed.
The amendment passes 6-5, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, we are going to have to take our mandatory break. We are late, and we will break for 15 minutes, and we will resume back here at 11:45. Okay, we're going to get started. So we're back on the main motion. If there are any questions for the main motion. Councillor LeBlanc?
Thank you. So I make a motion to amend the document at point 5.1.6. Speaks about evaluation of sponsorship opportunities. 5.1.6.2 says ethical scans, which is making sure it lines up with the restrictions we've talked about, will be conducted on all sponsorships 15,000 or more in value. My proposed amendment is to remove that, implicitly making it so that these ethical scans will be conducted on all sponsorships, making sure nothing slides under the radar. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc? Do you want him to repeat the amendment? So you're just wanting the 5.1.6.2 removed? Or just ethical? Yeah, right, that ethical scans will, yeah, we'll take out the 15,000 and it'll just be scanned on all sponsorships. Okay. Very clear. Councillor Zakidniak, is this on the amendment?
No, it was for the,
Main motion?
the main motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any. We'll call the vote. Oh, pardon? Sorry, just,
On the amendment.
this is on the amendment, yeah.
With respect to Councillor LeBlanc's amendment, I will begin with you, Councillor LeBlanc, please.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Shaw,
Opposed.
Councillor Zahidniak,
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli, Councillor Mancinelli, Councillor Moole,
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk,
In favor?
Councillor Hawkins,
In favor.
Councillor Stevens,
In favor.
Councillor Findura,
Opposed?
Mayor Masters,
Opposed.
Councillor Mancinelli, are you on the line? And Councillor Bresciani.
Opposed.
It passes 6-4. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Councillor Zakidniak, you're next. On the main motion.
Thank you. So I just have an undertaking that I would like to see from city administration with the report in Q4. So what I would like to see is a report on options to better align our policies with regard to alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, well, any potentially addictive substances. So to eliminate the language that implies a bit of a double standard currently, like that's much more permissive regarding alcohol as opposed to tobacco and cannabis. So I would just like to see some alignment with how do we deal with substances that are considered potentially addictive. What are some options for that? Does that make sense? Through the chair?
Yes. Is that an amendment, or are you wanting a response from the administration? Is it an
I
undertaking?
think, yeah, I would just like, I don't need an amendment at this time. I would just like to see some options identified in the report that comes in Q4. So I'm just wishing for it to be an undertaking. So I don't know if I need a response from administration, if that's clear, or if that sounds feasible to them.
So, Ms. Folk, if you can respond, please. Can that undertaking been done?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. So what I'm understanding, Councillor Zahidniak, when the report comes forward in Q4, what you would like is an assessment of how our existing elements around restrictions are outlined and some options on how to address that to make sure there's consistency with tobacco, cannabis, and how we're treating alcohol, so addictive substances. So absolutely, we can endeavor to do that and make sure that's part of our annual policy review when we report back.
Great, and just for a bit more information, regarding alignment, it could be, I don't have a particular iteration of that in mind, like it could be more permissive, less permissive. I would just like to see better alignment. So what are some options for how we could achieve that, however that looks, like in a wide variety of possibilities for how we could do that.
Thank you very much. We will take that away and include it in that conversation. We'll talk about how that also aligns with the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards, and I believe that's an important element because that does give us guidance in terms of what we can advertise and what we can't. And so we'll include that analysis in the report as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, and no one in the chat box, I will ask the clerk to call the question on the main motion.
Sure. With respect to the main motion as amended, Councillor Mancinelli, you moved the report, so I will call on you first, please.
In favor.
Councillor Mole?
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak?
In favor.
Councillor Shaw?
Opposed.
Councillor LeBlanc?
In favor.
Councillor Findura? Councillor Findura? Councillor Stevens?
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins?
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk?
In favor?
Councillor Findura, are you on the line?
I'm back online, yes, in favor.
Mayor Masters?
Opposed.
Councillor Bresciani?
In favor.
Passes 9-2, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to call upon, so we're going to move to delegations now, and we just need a little time to get this up and going here. Okay. Yep. We're good? Okay. So we're going to move to delegations. Deb Jones, representing the Cathedral Area Community Association. If you're online, if you could please introduce yourself for the record and the organization you represent, if you have 5 minutes in your presentation. And there may be questions after.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Or?
Yes, we sure can. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, Mayor Masters and committee members. My name is Deb Jones, and I am one of the administrators of the Cathedral Area Community Association. The CACA appreciates the city's ongoing support with our annual operation funding and our office space at no charge. In the review of the community associations that was done recently, the city identified that the Phase 1 and Phase 2 community associations had a lack of core funding and rising operational costs. And last year, the city gave us access to 20% more funding that we can apply for operational costs, which we really do appreciate. I'm here today to ask for a change in the new lease agreement relating to the staff parking spots. The CACA staff has parked in the parking lot at the Cathedral Neighborhood Center over the years, but has never had a stall designated to them, and there was never a cost to use the spot. In the new lease, it's stating that we would now have to pay $338 each year for the spot. We use our staff vehicles to meet with community members, to do our banking, to get supplies for programming and events, and don't feel that it's good use of our time to be driving around looking for parking spots every time we return to the office or having to go out every 2 hours to move our vehicle from the street. We also wonder if we are paying for the spot, would it be designated with a sign that it's a spot exclusively for our use, as often users of the building, when they come for classes or programs, will park in the parking lot and we can't get into it when we do return from wherever we've been. The $338 may not sound like a lot of money, but We carefully plan our budget each year for our programming, and we do not feel that we should have to cut any more of our programming budget, and we do not feel that this cost should be passed on to the staff. It would be a small support for the city to provide and to go along with other efforts toward a more supportive relationship with the community associations. The Cathedral Area Community Association and also the Heritage Community Association both have offices that are in or near the downtown area, and there's a strain on the parking in this area. As mentioned earlier, cannot park on nearby streets without having to move our vehicles every 2 hours, and oftentimes there's no available parking within a few blocks of our centers. This new cost for parking spots would go against the recommendations that came out of the city's consultations with the community associations, which suggested that we require more financial and in-kind support from the city in order to keep up with the growing needs in the neighborhoods. And the executive committee has the opportunity to contribute to that by keeping the parking spots in our leases as an in-kind support to the community associations. So I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Questions from from council for our delegation? Councillor Stevens.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Other than the parking issue, you're supportive of the report and the agreement with the city, that's correct?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Just to be clear, you're supportive of the agreement with the city with the exception of the parking question, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If for whatever reason you weren't dedicated a spot and it was no charge, would you still be okay with that? So in other words, it would be for the members of the public to use and you just have to compete with others?
If that's what it came to, we'd have to work with that, but we'd prefer to have, the spot that we could access whenever we needed it to come to the office. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Would you be satisfied if the cost aligned with whatever the city charges employees?
I'm not sure what the city's employees do pay for it, but we personally think that it should be another one of the in-kind in our agreement, like some other things that we have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, I do have a question for you. What are some of the other in-kinds that you do get from the city?
We have office spaces provided for us, and we don't pay utilities. So our lights and power, we pay a phone and things like that. But
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And how many staff are there?
We have one full-time and two part-time. But one doesn't have a car and one just lives a block away, and one lives further away than that. So we'd only require the one spot.
So the one full-time spot, or the one spot would be dedicated to the full-time person? Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yeah.
Okay. And, sorry, previously, how did this work?
We've been using one of the parking spots. It's not designated to us. I don't think any of them right now are designated to anyone in particular. So, like if we do come here and there's no parking, then we just have to drive around until we can find a spot.
Okay, so there is other parking there?
It's just on the street parking with the 2-hour time limits.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no other parking lots as such that we can use.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Mancinelli?
Thank you. I have one question. Did you receive any advice from an accountant or a monetary professional regarding how to allocate this cost of parking? The reason I ask is many employers have this, and they use the cost of the associated spot as an in-kind payment to staff to offset the costs of the lease, basically, for the spot being used. And I know it's of a different dollar-for-dollar servicing than if you paid it outright. Just wondering if you had any accounting advice on this.
No, we hadn't.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. There are no further questions. Go ahead. Sorry, there is one more question. Councillor Zakidniak.
Hi there. Thank you. I just want some clarity. So currently, there's a small parking lot that you folks, no designated spot, but there is, I think, there is a small parking lot that if there's space available, the employee who requires parking either parks in that parking lot at no cost or on the street. Is that accurate?
Ms. Jones?
Right, yeah. There's 2 city staff that are in the building, and I think there's 4 spots plus a caretaker spot and a handicap spot.
And currently, there's no charge affiliated with these spots. They're available for first come, first serve, free of charge.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Ms. Jones, for appearing today. You
You're
can
welcome.
leave the conversation. Thank you. Can
Thank
I have
you.
someone please consider or move the report, EX 21-6, Community Associations leases, please? Oh, we have one more delegation. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see here. Where are we? Okay. Ms. Shana Stock, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Thank you, and my apologies. You know the role here. You can introduce yourself and the organization you represent. You've got 5 minutes, and there may be questions after. Go ahead.
Sure. Good morning, Chair Bresciani and committee members. My name is Shana Stock. I'm the Executive Director of the Heritage Community Association. I'm going to echo some of Deb's same comments, basically starting by saying that we're really grateful for the city's ongoing support in terms of our annual operational funding and also the provision of our office space at no charge. And we want to thank the City of Regina employees who have worked hard to bring this lease together. Overall, it signifies a renewed commitment from the city towards a stronger relationship with community associations, and for the most part, we support this lease. For example, it does. We previously paid for our energy bill, and one change that this lease includes is that it would have the city taking over those costs for us, which is aligned with the recommendations that came out of the CA review, which found that Phase 1 and Phase 2 community associations are really struggling with a lack of core funding in combination with rising operational costs. So that change is really welcome, and we're grateful for it. I'm here to ask for the same change as Cathedral Area Community Association, which is related to our parking spots. So HCA currently has 2 designated parking spots, which we do not pay for and have not for as long back as I can find records for. And the lease is proposing that we would now have to pay for those 2 parking spots, which would amount to $338 a year each, or $676 annually total. HCA relies on staff vehicles to run our core programming. Without a programming space in our building, we are regularly hauling equipment to and from Thompson School and other venues. We use staff vehicles to do large grocery shopping runs for our food security programming multiple times a week. So they're used they're not just simply staff parking. They're used for the daily operations of our work, and in the same way that utilities and our office space are. And so we're asking for those costs to be, that service to be provided in kind from the city as another one of the supports towards community associations. As Deb said, the cost might not seem like a lot per year, $676, but it would make a negligible difference to the city's bottom line, and it would help us out a lot by not requiring us to download that cost onto staff, which already don't make huge incomes, and it would be an easy form of additional support for the city to provide. Heritage and Cathedral community associations, like Deb said, are in a unique position compared to other CAs. Our offices are in or near downtown, so strain on parking is high. We cannot park on nearby streets without having to move our vehicles every 2 hours. And in our case, nearby street parking is not immediately next to our building, so we would not be able to use our parking spots to do the big hauls of equipment and groceries and that type of thing that we use them for. Just in closing, the city is off to a good start on implementing many of the recommendations from the review that you did of community associations, and we're really excited about a stronger, more interactive relationship with the city, and this committee has the opportunity to contribute to that by keeping our parking spots in our leases as in-kind support to organizations which do a lot of great work to support the city's vision. Thank you, and I'm open to questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Ms. Stock. Is there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Zakidniak?
Thank you. Thank you, Shayna. I just have a question regarding your request. So just in terms of considering possibilities, if there were the possibility of the city offering one designated parking spot in kind to community organizations, is that a change that you would be in favor of? Like, would you be able to support that through the chair?
Yeah. We would prefer that to the existing draft in the lease, which would have no in-kind parking spots. We do have 2 full-time staff, so we would probably keep both spots and absorb the cost for the one. We wouldn't probably want to go down to 0 or to 1 spot total, but that would be preference over what exists in the lease, but our ideal is to have both provided in kind as a support to the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Stock, for appearing today. You can leave now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I have someone move the motion, please, or move the report? Thank you, Councillor Moore. Thank you. Any discussion? Any questions for administration? Councillor Stevens?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I really did not want to talk about parking for this, but to administration, if you could just comment on what would happen if they didn't. Would it mean that the staff at these community associations would not be able to park on site? Would it just be leased out to members of the public who want to use it?
Who's going to take that question? Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair. I'll just make an initial comment and then I'll ask Ms. Biden if she has any additional comment on how such an arrangement would work. So the report is recommending paid parking. The rationale for that is just more with respect to consistency, with respect to we charge our staff for parking. And so the amount in this piece is consistent with what staff would be charged for parking stalls at those facilities. And we do charge parking when we have other tenants of city facilities. With respect to if we didn't charge for parking here, how it would work, I would ask if Ms. Biden has comment on how she would see that arrangement working.
Ms. Biden?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think Barry was meaning Ms. Bizdell. That would be me.
Yeah, Ms. Bizdell, go ahead.
Sorry, Shauna.
That's no problem. With regards to the parking spots, so there are a couple available. If we do not lease these spots out specifically to the community associations, then they would be vacant, non-charged, and open for anybody to park there. Therefore not securing specific spots for the CA staff.
Councillor Stevens?
Great. Thank you. Just one final question. Just behind the Heritage Community Association is the RPS, or nearby is the RPS parking lot. How much do we charge the RPS for those spaces?
Ms. Bisdell? Mr. Lacy? Or who wants to take that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Bisdell, go ahead.
Thank you. I believe that we do not charge for those spots for the RPS. We are mandated to provide those spots. It's actually in the union agreements with staff.
Okay, thank you. If this was just about the Heritage Association, I would probably follow that lead. So I'll make the amendment, because if we're offering it to them, I see no reason why we couldn't offer it to others who are delivering an important service. So I'll amend that we remove the parking charges from the lease agreement and from the report.
So we have Councillor Stevens has an amendment to remove the parking charges. Okay. Thank you. So do Councillor Stevens, do you want to speak to that, or are you just, is that okay? And we'll just.
Well, just briefly, honestly, like for some of these associations, Cathedral especially, it's probably the most accessible space for transit, walking, and biking. I'm not sure that they should be entitled necessarily to free parking. However, if we have a message for the RPS, which is you are entitled to free parking, there already seems to be some inconsistency in city policy. So I'm happy to see this fee waived for those staff as well.
Thank you. Mr. Holden?
So just to, through you, Madam
Yes.
Chair, just to reinforce what Ms. Bisdell said. So the RPS cover the costs of leasing parking lots within their budget. So there is a charge that the RPS pays in terms of leasing parking lots. Through their collective agreements, they are obligated to provide complimentary parking to their staff. So, you know, that is a discussion, I think, for the police commission to have with the RPS in terms of if that's something that they want to negotiate going forward. But as Mr. Lacy said, this is consistent with the approach that we take for city staff. So we're just trying to level the playing field between, you know, our community associations that has been pointed out provide very valuable services. That's the intent behind what we're trying to do. So it's not as easy to make a direct comparison to the police service.
Thank you. Mayor Masters? Okay, good. Good, he answered the question. Okay, good. Any other questions? Councillor Menson, let's see, Councillor Stad would be actually, sorry, is it Kiniak?
So just for clarity regarding the amendment, so is the amendment seeking a continuation of what is currently the status quo then to the mover?
Councillor Stevens?
Sure, I wasn't all that aware of the status quo, but however you want to read it, it would just mean a suspension of that fee.
Kiniak?
Okay, I think that covers my questions related to the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Stadnichuk?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, a question. So even though the RPS would have parking provided to them under the collective agreement, I'm assuming that would be a taxable benefit?
Who wants to take that? Is that a taxable benefit? Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd hate to provide that advice with certainty right now. Ms. Folk might have additional information. My view on that would be if it's a dedicated parking spot provided, it is a taxable benefit. If it's just a broader scrambled parking spot that the public can use or anybody else, I don't necessarily believe that that would be a taxable benefit in that case. And I see Ms. Folk is shaking her head yes, that how I've described it is correct. And my understanding right now is that these parking spaces are currently first come, first serve. If there's spots. So it's basically if there's spots available, it's first come, first serve.
That's right.
On any unallocated spots at those centers.
Thank you. Councillor Stanichuk?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I'm not familiar with, I mean, the report does talk about which community associations have office spaces, and there are a number of community associations that don't have any. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand what the in-kind value is, like if we approve this, what the in-kind value is for these community associations versus other community associations in the city. I just would like to, ensure that there's some kind of fairness.
Mr. Lacy?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is the reason that we have this related issue with respect to the leases is that right now they are unallocated. Sorry, if there's unallocated parking there, it is kind of first come, first serve, public whoever's there. It's my understanding that the reason we're looking at building it into the lease is they've requested that there be a dedicated spot. So just like our employees, dedicated parking, then we have, we charge for the parking. And maybe I'll just ask Ms. Bisdell to confirm that. And I understand that this treatment is consistent with other community associations, but I'll ask Ms. Bisdell to confirm my understanding.
Ms. Bisdell?
Through you, Madam Chair. Correct. What Mr. Lacy said is essentially the report was trying to be consistent with all community associations, consistent with employee, staff, parking. It is on a cost recovery basis. I do believe that there, to the first delegate's comments with regards to the increase of funding in the community association review, those funds were to be utilized by each association as they see fit. So the intent of the report was to be fair to all community associations.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Councillor Mancinelli?
My question's been asked and answered to do with the taxable benefit there.
Thank you, Councillor Mancinelli. In regards to the fairness in this, is that because right now no other community association gets a dedicated parking spot, and if we were to open up to this amendment, it would only be to these four. Is that accurate? Mr. Lacy?
To you, Madam Chair, I'll refer that question to Ms. Bisdell in the detail.
Ms. Bisdell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. We have different agreements with different community associations. So the agreements here today are lease agreements with community associations that do not operate the building. We also have agreements with community associations where they do operate the building, including the parking lot. So that means that they would have the cost to operate the parking with regards to electrical, snow clearing, all those maintenance costs to a parking lot. We do not charge an additional charge for those parking spots because we, as the city, are not maintaining that property. So with regards to equality, it isn't necessarily comparing apples to apples, but essentially you can assume that the cost per spot is essentially $13 a spot to the community association that is operating the facility. However, it's just not a direct payment to the city of Regina.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. I will ask the clerk to call the question on the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll begin with you, Councillor Stevens as the mover.
Yes.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Mole.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk. Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Passes unanimously, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, back to the main motion. Any more questions for administration on the main motion? I can't scroll up. Councillor Zakidniak on the main motion.
Thank you. I think I would be interested in seeing a report regarding parking and how from administration regarding recommended changes or consistencies. A report on like how we currently approach that with city partners and city employees of all kinds, and so this to be considered in a comprehensive way so that we can ensure that we have consistency. Is there anything currently planned regarding that, like a briefing on how we currently approach parking?
Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there is nothing currently planned to bring that information forward. I think we could always put that into an information item or a briefing note for council, and we can share that information with council.
Councillor Zakidniak?
Thank you. Yes, I'd be interested in that. And just for clarity, I'm just interested in what are our policies regarding parking with city employees and city municipal corporations and city partners. So I would be interested in that information. And as a follow-up, with the 2014 parking strategy or policy that was referenced with the temporary parking lot, is that information covered at all in that report through the chair?
Mr. Lacey?
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, just if I could have clarification, the temporary parking lot where?
No, sorry, so this was referenced in the submission by Regina Downtown bid. So it was a request for us to review the 2014, I believe it's their 2014 parking strategy or policy. I don't know if it was specific to downtown. So I don't know if, sorry, I don't have the name of that policy right now, but I'm wondering if there were a review of that document, if that would cover off what I'm talking about, or if those are two separate issues.
Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, these are two totally separate pieces. If I understood the initial inquiry, it relates to basically the various city parking policies we have with respect to parking lots or land that we own that basically we either charge city employees to park in those spaces, or whereby we have lease agreements with some of our partners, and what the parking lot accommodation situation is with respect to those leases. And so that would be the focus of what we bring back. What you're referring to is a broader parking lot policy with respect to downtown, which basically covers private sector parking lots as well, and more broadly, what is the city's view and direction with respect to the amount, number, et cetera, of parking available downtown. They're two different matters.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So is there anything further you need from me, or this is an undertaking that you folks, I don't know if there's, I don't have a particular, if there's a particular timeline in mind. For myself, I'm open to your suggestion.
So,
Mr.
through
Lacey?
you, Madam Chair, I guess the question I would have is, would you like us, I'm just conscious of council's time, would you like to provide that to you through a briefing note that we would share just directly with council, or bring it back as a report? I guess that's the clarification I would have.
Okay,
I see
hang on.
Mr. Holden would like to make comment.
Mr. City Manager, go ahead.
So through you, Madam Chair, and to Councillor Zahidniak's question. So the conversations around parking and moving to paid parking really came out of conversations in which we wanted to be able to maintain and care for our parking lots. And should those costs come from the tax base, or should those come from the users, which in our case is staff who have either an assigned space, or they have an opportunity to access a scramble parking space. So we have different rates depending on whether they have a dedicated spot or whether they have access to a parking lot on a first come, first served basis. So I think it would be appropriate that we share with council our policy related to our employee parking. And then we are basically looking to extend that to our partner organizations so that we have consistency in terms of being able to pay for parking lot improvements through our capital programs. And the monies that we collect actually go into a reserve to care and maintain and ultimately resurface parking spaces. So we'll make sure that we share that information with council, and if that doesn't satisfy the intent of your question, then we can revisit that at a future date.
Okay, thank you. Just for clarity, so are you suggesting that it would be a briefing note to begin with, and then if it needed to be broadened to a report, then we could discuss once there's a briefing note that we can refer to?
So through you, Madam Chair, we will provide the briefing note. I believe that will provide the information that you're requesting. If it doesn't, then there's an opportunity to come back and direct the administration further.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a sense of when the timeline would be for that briefing note?
Okay.
Mr. Lacey?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe we can get that back to you within the month.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mayor Masters?
Kidniak, what is your question? We're going to ask administration to prepare another report. Why? Like, they've given you the indication based on this report for this particular application relative to community associations as to how the current policy works for city staff and other community associations. So what exactly is the report that you want them to work on?
Councillor Zakidniak?
Well, I think that I'm just trying to think of I think it was Mr. Lacey who who reflected back to me the kinds of questions that I had. So, Mr. Lacey, I think it was Mr. Lacey, can you summarize what you said to me in terms of reflecting the information that I was looking for, because that did capture it well.
Sorry, Mr. Nicol would like to also comment. Go ahead, Mr. Nicol.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, without trying to steer this in one way or the other, it was my understanding that Councillor Zahidniak initially asked for the possibility of a report on a wide range of policies with respect to parking, including recommended changes for consistency amongst employees, partners, et cetera, et cetera. The question was posed to Mr. Lacey, could this perhaps come back through by way of a briefing note? So I think that Mr. Lacey has indicated that a briefing note would be what would come back. Mr. Holden has indicated that if that wasn't sufficient at that time, council could direct administration to follow up. So I think that with respect, Councillor Zahitniak's report and the expectation of a briefing note are one and the same. So I think that it should be all captured. I believe it's captured in the briefing note response. I don't think, if Councillor Zahitniak, if it seems to be that she's asking two questions, I think there's only one, and I think it's been asked and answered, and we'll get it through the briefing note.
No, I guess I'm curious because the question about the consistency as it relates to city employee parking community associations is within the report we're currently looking at. And the recommendation from council was that the recommendation before you to charge the community associations for the parking was consistent with how employees are currently charged. So asked and answered without a report. We just voted in opposition to that to grant community associations free parking. So I'm curious, and again, I'm just trying to be sensitive to loading on report after report after report when it's already been reported and then we voted in opposition to it. That's all I want to say. I really don't want this meeting to go on longer than absolutely necessary. It's completely unclear to me. Are you just going to reproduce the exact same report again?
Mr. Lacey, or who?
Through you, Madam Chair, our intent would be basically to provide a high-level briefing on how our employee parking policy works in the city, and extend that as well to when we lease space to our community partners, how that parking policy works as well, or how it's applied to leases.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. So, I think there is no further questions. Let's call the question on the report.
So with respect to the main motion, I will call on Councillor Moll, please.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Councillor Zahidniak.
In favor.
Councillor Shaw.
In favor.
Councillor LeBlanc.
In favor.
Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
In favor.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Stadnichuk.
In favor.
Mayor Masters.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Carries 11-0. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have someone please move a resolution for private session? Councillor Shaw.
So moved, Stadnichuk.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Seeing none? It's carried. We will, can I have a motion to recess for 10 minutes?
So moved. Andrew?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. We will resume back here at 12:40.